Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 209. This is PEP or Planet Extra podcast. I am the host of Planet America on ABC Australia, but this is not an official podcast of the ABCs. Repeat, not an official podcast, but on PEP we do cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you listen, you can find us on YouTube at the PEP with Chaz and Dr. Dave channel, and you can also see highlights on the PEP Clips YouTube channel. I believe Lockie is going to put up my reaction to when we found out that Daniel's Donuts came to Sydney. You should go and see that. It's well worth it. You will also find timestamps and show notes in our blurbs. And if you leave a comment under our current episode video, we are likely to see it. You can also tweet us or blue skies at PEPCHASDRDAVE. That's at PepChaz Dr. Dave. If you want to chat to some fellow Peppers, you can join our Discord server. It's on the screen right now or in the blurb of the podcast. But if you want to contact me or Lockie the Lackey privately, why not email us? The address is producer@pepthepodcast.com. That address again is producer@pepthepodcast.com. I will have some correspondence from that email address at the end of this episode. But for now, let's turn to the man we miss so much. While he's been gone, there have been all kinds of people raising their stakes on inconsequential views, not on this podcast, but elsewhere in Sydney. He hasn't been enforcing the... Because when Dave's around, I'm talking about Dr. Dave, of course. When Dr. Dave's around, no one raises their stakes on inconsequential views.
They don't dare.
They're too scared. And Dave, there's a new sheriff in town. He's Dr. Dave.
That's right. I'm Dr. David Smith. I'm an associate professor at the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney, but I don't speak for either of those institutions, especially today when, due to jet lag, I am severely cognitively impaired. Like, God knows what I'm going to say today, but whatever it is nothing to do with the United States Studies Centre or the University of Sydney.
However cognitively impaired you are, Dave, I am going to be playing a video later on where someone is more cognitively impaired than you.
Oh, good. I look forward to it.
I promise you that. Dr. Dave, what are you grateful for?
I am grateful for the brevity of Australian election campaigns. I mean, ours is going to be over ours is probably going to be over by the time you're listening to this. And I got to say, I've barely noticed it. Now,
I haven't noticed it at all.
Yeah. Now, that's partly because I'm one of the few people who hasn't been getting texts from the trumpet of patriots. So, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with Harry Fong's work. Also, I don't really watch TV except for the NRL, and they don't seem to be going after the NRL vote this year.
Yeah, there's some ads on the AFL.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
No ads on NRL?
No.
Oh.
Also, I don't exactly live in a marginal electorate.
No.
I live in Anthony Albanese's electorate. So I admire the courage of the Liberal who's standing for that, David Smallbone. Good luck on Saturday. But the more serious contender would be Hannah Thomas, the Greens candidate. But yeah, it's not much of a contest in Grainler. There's like a couple of hardy volunteers occasionally standing at traffic intersections, shuffling around, handing stuff out. But yeah, anyway, it's brief. And we have both Australia's laws around election advertising to thank for that. We also have the fact that it's the Prime Minister who decides when the election is called. It is not like the US, where you know the date of every future election literally millions of years into the future, providing that elections are still happening then.
That's
so
optimistic.
You can start your campaign whenever you want. You can't do that in Australia. So I'm grateful for that.
Fair enough. You've already demonstrated you know more about this election than I do by some way. All I know about this election is that someone, I don't know if it was a candidate or someone who's a friend of the candidate or someone asked someone else how their bum was. That's all I know. I don't know why. I don't know the context. That's my entire some knowledge of this election campaign.
Actually, just one more thing to add.
Yeah.
Last time, so I was saying there aren't really many candidates in my seat because it's the Prime Minister's seat. But last time around, there was a very notable candidate from the United Australia Party, which has been rebranded as Trumpet of Patriots. I don't know if he's running this time, but it was Father David Smith, also known as Fighting Father Dave.
Was this you?
No, it wasn't me. One of the weirdest clergymen in the inner west.
Was it Dave Smith from Brooklyn?
No.
That's a reach back.
No. He's like this hip Anglican priest who was running a boxing gym, but then the boxing gym got burnt down. So he might have made some enemies out there on the streets.
So he wanted to move to Parliament House instead.
Yes.
Well, you've demonstrated now you don't just know more about this election than I do, but the last election as well. Dave, I'll tell you what I'm grateful for.
What are you grateful for?
As always, I've got more than one, but they're very short. Number one, I'm grateful to Media Watch because I had a few things to say about Media Watch earlier this year, although not as many things as they had to say about me.
Yeah.
But given if you're going to knock something, you should compliment them when they do a good job.
Yeah.
And I at the time questioned the worth of the story that they were running in their first episode. But I've been watching on and off, and I saw a story this week about Ostentatious, which went for like 11 minutes. And you might think, why would you spend 11 minutes on Ostentatious? I disagree. I'm not being sarcastic. It was a great story because it was about Kim Williams, really, not about Ostentatious.
Yeah.
Kim Williams being the boss of the ABC. And it was a gutsy story about the boss of the ABC. They did a really good job. It was good storytelling. It was exactly what Me Watch should do. And I reckon, don't be scared of 11-minute stories, guys. When they're doozies, just embrace them. I mean, I know. Me saying you should go longer, who would have thought? But
speaking of good stories,
good on you. I'm grateful for it.
I've got a good one about Ostentatious.
Really?
It's Tangent Treehouse time.
Oh.
Now, this technically isn't a story about Ostentatious. It's a story about someone telling a story about Ostentatious. This was in the early 2000s in a pub in Chippendale, which I shall not name because I think its name has probably changed. Anyway, the proprietor at the time, he's no longer the proprietor because he was a hopeless proprietor, was explaining to us one night about why one of his previous pubs somewhere on the south coast had failed. And he said that it was because of the Masons. It was because of the bloody Masons in that town just did him in. They were prejudiced against him because he was of Catholic background. And his prime example of this was he said, I got Ostentatious at the height of his powers to perform at this pub and nobody turned up because of the bloody Masons.
Wow.
So there you go. You never knew about the power that the Masons had to actually prevent people from turning up to an Ostentatious performance somewhere on the south coast in the 80s.
That really shows that the Masons have gone from strength to strength over the last 40 years, doesn't it? That is a good story. Anyway, good on you, Media Watch. I'm grateful for that. But I'm also grateful to North Dakota Republican Governor Kelly Armstrong. Kelly Armstrong vetoed a bill this week or last week that would have required school districts to keep books determined to be sexually explicit out of the reach of impressionable children. They've already got a law in North Dakota that bars public libraries from keeping sexually explicit books in their children's section. This expanded it to school libraries. We've allowed concerned parents and others to initiate a review to an oversight board to make sure the children don't see anything inappropriate outside the internet where they spend their lives. And and this bill passed the Republican-dominated state Senate, 27-20, and the House 49-45. I'm surprised it's that close, to be honest. But Armstrong, who is a Republican, vetoed the bill, saying he felt it was a misguided attempt to legislate morality.
Good.
He said, while I recognise the concerns that led to its introduction, it represents a misguided attempt to legislate morality through overreach and censorship. The bill imposes vague and punitive burdens on professionals and opens the door to a host of unintended and damaging consequences for our communities. Now, there aren't a lot of reasons for a Republican governor to veto that kind of bill.
No.
There really aren't. It's the easiest vote in the world for a Republican. There are no votes in opposing won't someone think of the children. But Kelly Armstrong did. And there's only one reason you would, and that's because of principle. So good on you, Kelly.
Good on you, Kelly.
I'm grateful to you.
The children of North Dakota will continue to be able to read Ulysses in their school library.
I'm shocked.
If they want to read James Joyce's love letters, though, they'll probably have to look for those online.
I'm sure you'll have a link for them, Dave. If they email
No.
us.
You just look for them yourself.
But now we go just a couple of quickies. Like I said, Correspondence Central will be coming back at the end of the episode after Dave is finished. But there are a couple I want to get out now. Number one, because one of them involves you.
Okay.
And the other two, because they involve actual errors. When there's errors, I like them up the top. I like to embrace the errors.
Yes.
But when there's just general, just flim-flam with the listeners, then I can put it towards the end of the app.
Okay.
Dave, we'll start with yours.
Yes, yeah.
This is from Caleb. A question for Dave when he next graces us.
Yes.
It's now. I know you've spoken about fascism before and how you don't feel it fits Trump's particular flavour of authoritarianism. In light of Trump's first few months in office and the steps he's taken, has your opinion changed?
My opinion hasn't changed. I still don't think that he qualifies as a fascist. And that's because there are still some important components of fascism that aren't being met by the Trump administration and I think are unlikely to be met. One of them is ideological regimentation. It's the desire to remake an entire society, not just its politics, not just its institution, but to remake human beings, to create a new kind of person. Trump and his supporters just don't have that kind of breadth of vision. I know that sounds like an insult when I'm saying it, but it's actually a good thing that they don't have that kind of breadth of vision. They are not interested in like remaking a new American. As much as they talk about wanting an American golden age, which is something that you would expect to hear from a fascist, it's also something that you could hear from many other different political positions. What they're not interested in doing is completely remaking the American people, completely remaking how they think, how they act, how they speak. All of those things are hallmarks of fascism. And the other thing that's related to this is fascism is very futuristic. As much as fascism invokes mythical past golden ages, it also is a rejection of both the past and the present. It says that, the future is the best thing to come and the future is going to be completely different, even if it has these kind of components of the past involved. So often there is a kind of nostalgia involved in fascism, but there's also this real futurism. It's a rejection of everything. Now, I don't really see that with Trump. I see much more conservatism. I see much more kind of genuine nostalgia for the past and for a fairly narrow vision of the past as well. So I'm not seeing that kind of futurism there. Now, this is not to discount the very authoritarian things that Trump is doing. And certainly essentially establishing a gulag in Central America, having judges arrested, doing all that he can to concentrate as much power as he can in the executive. This is all very bad authoritarian stuff. But I see the endpoint of that as being more, at its most extreme, someone like Pinochet in Chile, who was certainly a far right-wing dictator, but once again, not a fascist, not interested in remaking the whole society at the level of the individual in the same way that Trump was. Like a lot of other authoritarian regimes, Trump actually wants to leave a lot of social institutions in place, even if he wants to completely change governmental institutions and completely destroy certain other institutions such as the media or the universities. There are still plenty of independent centers of power that he has no interest in dismantling. Like he has no interest in completely turning American businesses to the purposes of the American government. As much as he tries to intimidate business, he's not doing that in the same way that fascists do. He doesn't want to, do away with every social institution that there is. And I suppose in the end, Trump's ideological vision and that of his supporters is really pretty narrowly focused around the personality cult of Trump. And even though the personality cult is another element of fascism, there's generally much more ideological breadth. fascism ideologically has something to say about every single question. Trumpism does not have anything to say about any question that doesn't directly involve Trump in some way.
And just to add to your point, when you're talking about him turning businesses towards his ends, in the circumstances when he's moved closer to that than you might have expected, like for instance, co-opting law firms.
Yes, yeah.
He's done nothing with it.
No.
Like he's collected a whole bunch of law firms, and he's twirled his moustache a bit and gone, "Oh, isn't this cool?"
Yes, yeah.
And then done nothing.
Yeah, no. All he wants really is the groveling.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a great answer. Thank you, Caleb. Okay, so
It's a great question as well. Who knows? We may have to reassess at some point, but at the moment, that's where I stand.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm just going to cover the serious errors, and there are two from last week which I think are worth noting, both involving courts and both corrected by Jeff, who is, in my view, one of the VICs. He's a very important commenter. He's got some great stuff for us, Jeff, every single week in the comments, and he picked me up on two doozies. One in particular was very good. I'll do the best one first, which is involving the Supreme Court. I talked about the emergency ruling from the Supreme Court, and I talked about the 7-2 ruling from the Supreme Court. And Jeff took me to task, not just me. He took a lot of people to task because a lot of people got this wrong. And he's right. He's absolutely right. He said the Supreme Court decision at 1 a.m. on Easter Saturday, very early morning, was not 7-2, even though most people, including me, described it as 7-2. They didn't publish a vote count because it's an emergency ruling. They don't do vote counts. All we know is at least 5, a majority, voted to issue the extraordinary order. And we know that Thomas and Alito both put their name on the dissent from the order. It is false to say the rest of the Conservatives agreed with the order necessarily. They just didn't want to make a public showing of saying they disagreed. 2 more Conservatives could have sat in the middle between noted dissents and voting for the order. That's a great point. We just don't know. It could be 7-2.
Which is funny because
could be 5-4, could be 6-3. We don't know.
It's not even necessary for Thomas and Alito to register their dissent because you just know.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. It's just assumed.
Like every Supreme Court decision is something too. Yeah.
Yeah. But but that's a great point, Jeff. And I can't believe I missed that. And pretty much everyone else did as well. Well done.
Do you know how many hours of flagellation you've caused, Jeff? Self-flagellation.
I don't mind as long as I can correct it. I don't mind. I don't think I'm perfect.
Okay.
I'm okay to make mistakes as long as they're corrected. If I don't correct, then I start flagellating. The other one from Jeff is referring to the North Carolina District Court. Now, in this one, when I was talking about the North Carolina Supreme Court situation, I did say I was being a bit vague about the federal court situation because I'd gotten to that a bit late. And he just corrected me, just clarified the record. The North Carolina District Court judge said, let the curing process happen. That's for the ballots that they were examining.
This was not a case about ham.
No, definitely not. Let the curing process happen while they decide if it was lawful, as the curing process is fixing the ballots, trying to see whether people had ID, that kind of stuff, i.e. get the results ready while they hear the case. But the circuit court said, that's the appeals court, said that starting the cure was ridiculous. Creating the answers of who will win if you chuck certain votes will then drive the decision, plus the curing process is confusing to voters and might not be required if they find that the Supreme Court of the North Carolina decision was wrong. So Federal Circuit Court was actually the one that stopped this whole process, froze everything until the district court gathered evidence and decided if the decision was legal under federal laws. So really, I suggested that it could have been a district court that froze. No, it was a circuit court that did the freezing. So thank you, Jeff, for pulling me up on that as well.
Because boys don't cry.
I don't get it. Cure. That's right. Thank you. Okay. Now I get it. All right, a couple of quick updates before we get to the new content. There's a kind of new content as well. Press Act update. for those who have a very long memory, you might recall me tearing my hair out about the Press Act about 12 months ago. The Press Act, for those who don't remember, was a federal press shield law for journalist sources. It would have protected the confidentiality of journalist sources, materials, and devices at the federal law, and it would stop subpoenas of journalists' work or personal devices or their Google accounts or whatever. It would have guarded basically against federal surveillance on journalists of any kind.
Right.
That was the Press Act. And it was been kicking around for years. By some miracle, about 12 months ago, it passed the House unanimously. And then went up to the Senate. And it had a bipartisan set of Senate sponsors. Had Lindsey Graham, had Dick Durbin, had a whole bunch of people. But when it got to the Senate, it just sat in the committee, as so many things do in the Senate, without so much as a hearing. Dick Durbin was the chair of that committee. I blame him. And now he's getting out of Dodge. He's got no accountability. But they just always had something else to do in the Senate. That's the issue with the Senate. They never had enough time. And then when Trump won the election, of course he demanded that Republicans kill it. Even then, a lot of Republicans kept supporting it. And I was just going, please, if you do one thing for the rest of the year, do the Press Act. This is a really important law. Ron Wyden, God bless him, decided to skip the committee in December last. He just gave up and he tried to bring it to the floor himself. But that would require unanimous consent. And one single Republican got in the way. Can you guess that Republican? Just from my voice, can you guess who that Republican was?
Ted Cruz?
No, that's not the guy who I talk like this about. There's only one. Tom Cotton.
Right.
Tom Cotton defeated unanimous consent and the bill died. Skip forward.
Wow, so it wasn't Tommy Tuberville.
No, it wasn't Tommy Tuberville. He's the one you hate.
Yeah.
Skip forward to now. And Attorney General Pam Bondi just this week distributed plans inside the DOJ, which got immediately leaked, of course, to scrap DOJ policy protecting journalists and their sources from surveillance and subpoenas. Quote, I've concluded that it's necessary to rescind Merrick Garland's policies precluding the Department of Justice from seeking records and compelling testimony from members of the news media in order to identify and punish the source of improper leaks, she wrote. And it was leaked. This Justice Department...
Do you remember when, the discourse was all about Trump's running a really tight ship this time? Look how few leaks there are. I think that lasts about 4 hours.
Yeah, no, those days are definitely over.
Yeah.
I mean, there are fewer leaks from him than there are from his area than there are from Pam Bondi's and Hegseth's area.
That's true.
But anyway, this Justice Department will not tolerate unauthorized disclosures that undermine President Trump's policies, victimize government agencies, and cause harm to the American people, she said, which was also leaked. So what this means is when people start printing embarrassing stories from now on about the administration, they're going to start demanding information about who the sources were. And then they're going to start threatening jail time to those who don't play ball. This is on you, Dick Durbin. Brilliant. There's your little update. Next update, 60 Minutes. About 2 months ago, I don't think this was you, Dave. I was talking to Lockie about this one. I told you guys about the worst lawsuit ever. That's why I called it. Trump was suing CBS because 60 Minutes edited the Kamala Harris answer from an interview last year. They didn't butcher it. They didn't do anything weird with it. They just cut it in half. The only reason people even noticed this was because Face the Nation, another CBS show, strangely decided to edit the same answer in the opposite way. They used the other half.
Right.
Which is an unusual thing to do, but not an unethical thing to do. Those are both perfectly valid editing decisions.
Yes.
Either use the first half or the back half when you have a long answer. Whatever. It was just a strange thing that they did. Trump then decided to sue CBS for $20 billion under a false advertising law of all things. It was a very strange decision. I talked about it for half an hour. If you want to revisit my...
$20 billion.
$20 billion was the damages he felt were done to him in Texas alone. If you want to revisit my 30-minute description of this lawsuit and why it was so stupid, you can find the link in the homework. It'll be below this video. But the important bit is that there was, and this is why I brought it up in the first place, a chance that CBS would settle, even back then. Not because there was anything to the lawsuit, obviously.
Yes, yeah.
But because their parent company, Paramount, wanted to be sold to Hollywood studio Skydance, and the shareholders would have made a mint. But Trump's FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, is become quite a dodgy institution.
Mm-hmm.
And the FCC chief, Brendan Carr, who previously used to be a free speech warrior, we know how they often turn out, he used to say things like, a newsroom's decision about what stories to cover and how to frame them should be beyond the reach of any government official. And the United States doesn't need the FCC to operate as the nation's speech police. Well, now he's got a different view. He's now launching frequent news distortion investigations against TV stations that bother Trump, basically. I mean, the guy recently, if you don't know what I'm talking about, has been seen walking around with a lapel pin that is a golden Trump head.
Oh, my God.
Where he used to have an American flag, he now has a golden Trump head. And this photo that you're looking at, if you're watching the video, this photo was originally tweeted out by Benny Johnson.
Yeah.
But it was retweeted by Brendan Carr. The guy who's the head of a supposedly independent agency is tweeting out in celebration that he's walking around with a Trump lapel pin. Anyway, after the old FCC dismissed that stupid complaint of Trump's that was in parallel with the lawsuit, this guy, Brendan Carr, reopened it and is keeping the investigation going as long as possible. Hinting very strongly to Paramount that while the investigation continues, the sale is not going to happen. You see, the FCC has to give permission for the sale to occur. So that is why Paramount might settle. Now, cut to this week, and the last minute of 60 Minutes went a little like this.
In tonight's last minute, a note on Bill Owens, who until this past week was executive producer of 60 Minutes. He was our boss. Bill was with CBS News nearly 40 years, 26 years at 60 Minutes. He covered the world, covered combat, the White House. His was a quest to open minds, not close them. If you've ever worked hard for a boss because you admired him, then you understand what we've enjoyed here. Bill resigned Tuesday. It was hard on him and hard on us, but he did it for us and you. Stories we pursued for 57 years are often controversial. Lately, the Israel-Gaza war and the Trump administration. Bill made sure they were accurate and fair. He was tough that way. But our parent company, Paramount, is trying to complete a merger. The Trump administration must approve it. Paramount began to supervise our content in new ways. None of our stories has been blocked, but Bill felt he lost the independence that honest journalism requires. No one here is happy about it, but in resigning, Bill proved one thing. He was the right person to lead 60 Minutes all along.
Now, that is an extraordinary way for them to end that show.
Yes, it is.
Now, as Scott Pelley suggested there, this wasn't simply about the lawsuit.
No.
Apparently, back in January, the head of Paramount, Sherry Radston, appointed a supervisor for 60 Minutes after a controversial story about the Gaza war that Scott Pelley was referring obliquely to there. Then on April 13, they ran 2 stories in one episode about Zelensky and Greenland that were both critical of Trump. And Trump tweeted this about 60 Minutes. They are not a news show, but a dishonest political operative simply disguised as news and must be responsible for what they have done and are doing. They should lose their license. Hopefully the Federal Communications Commission, as headed by its highly respected chairman, Brendan Carr, will impose the maximum fines and punishment which is substantial for their unlawful and illegal behaviour. CBS is out of control at levels never seen before, and they should pay a big price for this. Make America great again. Like Trump, honestly, he's never heard of the First Amendment. But then Radston tried to tighten the reins further after that story, after that tweet, because she was upset by it.
Yes.
So that's related as well. But surely it's not a coincidence that Bill Owens, the boss of 60 Minutes, resigned 4 days after April 18, the day when the Paramount board had a meeting, and agreed to acceptable financial terms for a potential settlement with the president in the lawsuit, according to 3 people with knowledge of the internal discussions. April 22, Owens resigns. This, Dave, is a massive concern. They don't get much bigger than 60 Minutes.
No.
If they are folding when they've done nothing wrong, just because of corporate threats, we got a problem.
I would just say, and I've been thinking about this a lot, watching the way that universities have reacted to the Trump administration in different ways. None of us know what we're going to have left at the end of the Trump administration. And certainly none of us know what we're going to have in 10 years' time or in 100 years' time. But there's one thing that you are going to have left, no matter what happens, and that is your name. You've got to think long and hard about what you want your name to mean in a few years' time, because that is all that any of us are going to have left at the end for as long as we're lucky to be remembered. Okay? So what is your name actually going to mean? That's something that you should be thinking about.
That's a great point, Dave, although the one person who's not going to have their name is you, because your name's Dave Smith. You have everyone's name.
Yeah, that's true.
I've got the same name as a drug dealer in New York.
I've got a pretty useful out there. I share a name with a weird priest who tried to become the MP for Graindler. I share the name with an actual sitting MP of the ACT. Yeah,
but your point still stands.
Look, okay, but everyone else, you've got to think about what your name actually means.
That's a good point. And I did mention MediaWatch before. That was why I was upset earlier in the year, because I thought, well, in 10 years' time, people are going to find that bloody thing when they search my name, because no one else has my name. Anyway.
That's true.
And one more update on convincing people. We had a correspondence a few weeks back asking me how you change someone's mind. It's like someone who's like they were trying to change a MAGA person's mind.
Right,
But how you change someone's mind. And I gave my views about that. And I saw a really interesting clip this weekend from the Daily Show's Jordan Klepper. Sometimes they put up behind-the-scenes Q&As on YouTube. And I happened to watch it because I quite rate Jordan Klepper. And he was asked exactly the same question. And I thought he gave a great answer. And so I thought I'd play it for you guys. And Dave, see what you think about this one.
Here's what I think. Changing somebody's mind is hard to do. And I think if you are approaching something like, I want to change their mind, you ain't going to get anywhere. I think the problem we have right now is a crisis of certainty. I talk to everybody on all sides who are very certain about their beliefs. And if you actually want somebody to see something that they haven't seen before and cross that divide into believing something else, they have to acknowledge that they have a sense of uncertainty. And if they're being approached by somebody else, you have to acknowledge that you have a sense of uncertainty as well. And so I think in order to change somebody's mind, you have to be a bit of a loser to begin. And it sounds strange, but you have to concede something to get anywhere. And so is it going to happen on a TV show? Doubtful. But with friends and family, there's an opportunity. One, because there is a connection there and hopefully some love, although I know it's been a hard few years. But I think if you can approach that, not from a place of judgment and from a place of uncertainty, concede something that you don't know. Because guess what? You are probably a lot like me, and you wish you were as certain about the things that you want to be, but you had to put up these guards because people are coming at you with knives all the time, and it feels like the other side is so dangerous, and in many cases, they are. But if you can't relate to them like another human being and say, I too am uncertain about some of these things, then you will never reach them as a human being in asking them to come over to a side of better understanding. So I think our only option is a step towards concession.
What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think that's very good.
Yep,
Yeah,
I agree.
I mean, and I think for a lot of people to change their minds, they have to believe that it's their personal decision based on their own observations. Yeah, so that is also something to keep in mind.
Yeah, so what Jordan Klepper said, and be manipulative. Dave, let's get into the main content, polling.
Yes. So after 100 days, the polling for Trump is not looking good. Now, before we get into this, I think it is worth asking the question, but does that actually matter at all
It's a good question.
Right. Does this matter to somebody who is probably not running for re-election? I mean, it's frightening that I'm even saying the word probably there. But yeah, who is probably not running for re-election, who is really concerned about establishing a legacy rather than getting re-elected, heading up a party of people who don't necessarily see getting the most votes as being the path to winning an election, and heading up supporters who just don't believe that anything that the polls say at all, who believe that all of the polls are rigged and that there's such a historical record of the polls getting everything to do with Trump wrong that they don't matter. So it's worth asking, do they actually matter at all?
Even though, importantly, the polls were right in 2024.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that these polls do matter. For a start, even if polls are systematically biased against Trump and against Trump's policies, what these polls are all showing is big movement. Okay, so even if their point estimates are wrong, their directional estimates are all heading in the same direction. And those directional estimates are down.
Yeah, and fast.
And fast.
In the last 2 weeks.
And I think whatever fears that you have about Trump subverting democracy, you can't preemptively surrender to those fears and say, well, public opinion doesn't matter. There's nothing that anyone can do. No one can stop him, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Can I add to that as well, that it's all very well to go, nothing matters. This is the new world. Well, let's see. Yeah. Trump, unlike Biden, who spent the best part of the last 2 years of his presidency in the mid-30s, like a 36, 37 kind of zone. That's a bad zone to be in. Has never tasted below about 38, 39. If he does move into the 36, 30, 35 kind of zone, let's see what happens. He's never seen that before. In particular, Senate and House Republicans have never seen that before. Let's see how they react. I reckon maybe things haven't changed that much, and maybe 35% still really sucks and really changes the way a politician behaves. I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking about the Congress people who enable
Well,
him.
yes. So this is the important thing. This is the material effect that the polling could have. It's about Republican support for Trump, not about Trump himself. Now, even though the evidence is Trump actually is sensitive to public opinion. It hurts him when he sees his popularity going down, and as much as he might claim that the polls are all wrong, he knows when people are turning against him. So I think it actually it does matter for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
It's only been 100 days. The way that time gets distorted by politics, it feels like it's been a year, whereas the Australian election campaign feels like it's been going for a few hours. But yeah, it's only been 100 days. Now, I say this because the number of things that have happened in that 100 days, the length of time it seems to have taken to get to 100 days can really distort our understanding of where Trump should be at this point according to historical norms. He should still be in a honeymoon period.
Should we have a look at what the other presidents were doing at this point in time?
Yes, we should. What you can see from this is that every president not named Trump
and Ford.
Ford came in difficult circumstances. And I think actually Clinton had a bit of a dip there as well. But every president not named Trump was in positive territory at this point. Joe Biden was still enjoying quite the honeymoon at this point. This was before the Afghanistan withdrawal, which I think was in August, which was what sent things kind of irrevocably downhill for him. But usually people are not even thinking that much about the president at this point.
Importantly, a lot of those lines, not all of them, but a lot of those lines are flat as well.
Yeah. Now, one of the reasons, so there are a few reasons why the first 100 days are so important. One is it's the period of maximum political capital for presidents. Okay, this is when both their own party and their opponents are most likely to cooperate with them. It's when they're most likely to be getting positive press coverage, and it's when they have the most popular support. One of the reasons why they have a lot of popular support is people have reverted to the luxury of not thinking about politics for a while. Like, oh, yeah, well, we've got a new president. Yeah, they're doing a great job. That's kind of the default response in surveys. This is not happening with Trump. No. He had a few days of that. Far, as you can see from that, far less than a month of that. And that's because Trump has to make everything about himself all the time, right? So people have been paying attention to everything that he's been doing. He deliberately arranges everything for maximum attention all the time. So whether he likes it or not, whatever is happening, people are attributing it directly to him. And we will get back to that when it comes to the economy. So he has basically sabotaged his own honeymoon period by trying to do the number of things he's tried to do so quickly and so destructively.
Interestingly, if you look at all the presidents again, if you look at Trump himself in his first term, he's pretty much the only one who didn't have any honeymoon period. His first term, he just went straight down from the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's why in his second term, when he had, like you said, about 25 days of honeymoon period.
Yeah.
He started off in this term much better than in his first term. But now he's fallen below his first term.
In this term, he had much more of a sheen of democratic legitimacy because he'd won a majority of the popular vote, which he didn't have in the first term. There weren't mass protests greeting him as a result, and the average American was probably more prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt. But he showed very quickly that he was not going to do what most people elected him to do. Now, I've got an important distinction to make here because it has been widely commented he's doing things that he promised to do. Absolutely. He is absolutely doing things that he said that he was going to do, even things which were widely ignored at the time or dismissed. No, he is doing things that he promised that he would do, but that's not what he was elected to do. He was primarily elected to bring prices down. This was reflected in what people actually cared about in exit polls. Okay, even concerns about illegal immigration were relatively trivial on the list of what people really cared about compared to the economy. Yeah. He was elected to fix the economy. And by fixing the economy, people didn't have in mind bringing back the 50s auto industry. What they had in mind was bringing prices down. That was their major concern about the economy. And he made it very clear almost from the beginning of his presidency that not only was he not going to actively try to bring prices down, he was going to pursue policies that would actively push prices up. Okay.
That's true.
This, I think, is the major reason for his decline in popularity. And you can see this most clearly on his economic numbers. His economic numbers were traditionally a strength for him. Even in his first term when he was quite unpopular, for at least the first 3 years, perceptions of his economic management were very good. Now, this, in my view, was always overblown because the first 3 years of the Trump economy looked so much like the last 3 years of the Obama economy. But the way it was always spun as Trump's doing a fantastic job with the economy. And the media, which was always looking for something positive to say about Trump to balance all the negative things that they have to say, would always be like, oh, well, he's doing a really good job with the economy. He wasn't doing any kind of job with the economy. The economy was just continuing to chug along in the same way that it had done with Obama. The major thing that he did to the economy was a corporate tax cut towards the beginning of his first term, which basically resulted in a lot of share buybacks and really nothing else to show for it.
But having said that, David, at the very least, I mean, I take your point.
Yes.
I think it's a correct point.
Yes.
But at the very least, when you do something that's eye-catching, like a tax cut,
yes,
and the economy's doing fine,
that's right.
What the president does, it goes, look, I did that.
Yes.
That's how it works.
Yes.
Right? So you can see the logic on how people would have been impressed with his first term economy.
Having said that, though, in his first term, the number of people who said that Trump was primarily responsible for the economy was about 40% of the population.
That's interesting.
The number of people now who say Trump is primarily responsible for the economy is about 60% of the population. And their views of the economy now are not good. Not only is that unusual compared to Trump's first term, that is unusual compared to every other president. So there was a Marist PBS NPR poll this week that showed that 59% of people attribute the economy to Trump rather than to his predecessors, right, which is significant because he's been blaming the recent bad economic news on Biden. The news today that the GDP had shrank by 0.3%, he said that that's a result of the Biden overhang.
Yes.
That is not how the majority of Americans see it. And furthermore, like during Obama's presidency, right, in 2015, there wasn't even a majority of people saying that the economic situation was due to Obama. When Obama, at this point in Obama's presidency, it was less than 10% of people were saying that the state of the economy was due to Obama, even though Republicans were already trying to blame it on him at this point. Normally, people don't see the president as actually being directly responsible for the result of the economy, no matter how much they try to take credit or defer blame for it. And usually that is the correct view. Usually the president doesn't actually have that much to do with the economy. But this time, a majority of people think that he has a lot to do with the economy, and they're also correct.
Yeah. Like Liberation Day
Yes.
is his, I mean, we'll see.
Yeah.
It seems like Liberation Day is his Afghanistan withdrawal.
Yeah.
It seems like that's the big moment that has cut through everyone.
Yes.
Everyone's aware of it.
Yeah.
And everyone goes, right, this is the Trump term.
Yeah.
Liberation Day. Is it going to work or is it not going to work?
Yeah.
And so far, they feel like it's not working.
Yeah. Look, Liberation Day is his D-Day, but it's D-Day as it was experienced by the Germans. The amount of uncertainty that has created. This is one of the things that is just creating so many problems in the economy. It's created so much uncertainty for consumers. So one of the reasons why GDP shrank was so many people bought imported goods in March in anticipation of the tariffs. It's created a huge amount of uncertainty for importers and retailers. It's created a huge amount of uncertainty for manufacturers. It's created a huge amount of uncertainty for investors overall. All of this means less economic activity. And the constant kind of partial withdrawal from tariffs, followed by renewed threats around tariffs, followed by vague assurances that Trump knows what he's doing, none of this is helping, right? It is all just increasing the uncertainty that is contributing to these very bad economic numbers. So people are absolutely right to blame the state of the economy on Trump. It's not all because of Trump, but they're right that it's a majority because of Trump.
And when what we're looking at right now are the averages from GL Morris of issues, and you can see the economy is currently minus 14.3, and it's been heading pretty steadily down from the beginning. So, yeah, that's what Dave's talking about.
Yes, and if you disaggregate that, it's a trade. So trade is minus 20.5, and inflation cost of living is minus 22.6.
Which is what Dave just said he was elected to fix.
Yes, that's right. Another really notable thing on this graph, immigration is now at minus 2.8.
Yes.
That was his strongest issue.
As you can see, until 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, it was a very strong issue. It was still up +5.
Now, it still is a little bit contingent on how questions are actually asked. Like if questions are asked specifically about the border, I think he still tends to be above water. But asking about immigration, okay, so he has actually managed to make himself unpopular on immigration.
Yeah.
Now, I would guess that's because of, people are worried about things like deportation of US citizens.
Yeah.
Wrongful deportation of people who courts said could not be deported to certain countries, and the admission that mistakes had been made, and then just the complete mockery of the legal process.
On that note,
yes,
Fox performed a very valuable service with their poll, which is they split up immigration into different components. This goes to what you were saying before. They asked about border security, and Trump was up 55 to 40 in approval for border security.
Yes.
They asked about immigration generally.
Yep.
He was down 47 to 48. They ask about deportations, and he's
Yes.
down 45 to 49.
Yes.
Basically, the closer they get to the two magic words, El Salvador,
Yes.
the worse the polling gets. And that, if you look across all the polls in the last week,
Yes.
he is universally incredibly unpopular
Yeah.
on the issue of El Salvador
Yes.
and Abrego Garcia.
Yeah.
That the decision for Van Hollen to go down to El Salvador, which I must say, if you asked me from a strategy point of view before he went down, I would say I'm not sure it's a great strategy. I think you should. I think you guys should. In fact, I did say on this podcast to Jared, I thought Democrats should sell this issue because it's an important issue.
It's a very important issue.
Even if it polls badly, it's an important issue. As it turns out, it's polling its tits off. It's
Yes.
doing really well. Trump really misjudged this one.
Yes, and I'd like to give a completely negative shout out to Gavin Newsom. You utter coward, right? It is the greed and cowardice of American elites that is one of the things that is, keeping Trump afloat in the first place. And that kind of attitude, accused MS-13 members are deeply unpopular, therefore let's not try to make an issue out of this. You've got to make an issue out of this because if they can deport him without due process, they can do things to you without due process. Okay, that is the point of due process, right? If you undermine it for one person, you're undermining it for everybody. And it's an incredibly important issue.
No, I'm glad that you backed me up on that one, Dave. Are we going to talk a little bit more about immigration here? Because if so,
Yes.
I'll go in a little bit more.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Just to back up my point before about how the Abrego Garcia thing actually has turned out to be a great poller. First of all, you look at YouGov economists, 28% to 50% on the handling of the Abrego Garcia case. 28% approval to 50% disapproval.
Yeah.
Only 27% of people were convinced he's a member of MS-13, which, to be honest, I think he is a member of MS-13.
Really?
But, yeah, we'll get to that. But it doesn't matter. The point is, I mean, number one, it doesn't matter whether he's MS-13 or not.
Yeah.
You should still treat him
Yes.
the way with due process.
Yes.
But that aside, Trump's propaganda has completely failed. Like, they're just not buying it. Washington Post had 21% want Garcia deported to 39% say he should be returned.
Yeah.
The YouGov did a fascinating thing. They asked a whole series of statements. What do you think is true? Or what do you know is true about Abrego Garcia? And I've just taken the highlights here. It's really interesting. That the Supreme Court ordered the US to facilitate his release from El Salvador. 52% said yes, that's true. 6% said false. Do you remember Stephen Miller made a big thing in the Oval Office in that meeting with El Salvador that actually the Supreme Court supported them?
Yes.
No one bought that.
My God, Stephen Miller's not cutting through?
But Trump tried the same thing. People haven't bought it. 6% have bought that. The government, this next statement, the government is not complying with the Supreme Court order to facilitate his release from El Salvador. According to Trump, he is complying. According to everyone else, he's not. 45% say it's true. 13% say it's not true. Now, there are some big unknowns there.
Yeah.
Because, of course, this is technical shit. Of
Yeah.
course, 40% are going to go, I got no idea. But the fact is, for the people who have an opinion,
Yes.
overwhelmingly were not with Trump.
By the way, when this actually goes to court, Trump has given the other side's lawyers everything that they need on this in an interview that he's done in the last 48 hours. I can't remember who it was with.
Terry Moran.
Terry Moran.
Yeah, this is the clip I was referring to.
Yes, yeah.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Let's save it
but
for
anyway,
now. Yeah. He illegally immigrated to the US as a teenager, which
It's
he
true.
did.
Yes.
It's true. Only 33% say that's true. 10% say it's not true. So that hasn't got through as much as the fact that Supreme Court slapped them down.
Yes.
That's the bit that's really gotten through.
Yeah.
He has tattoos symbolizing MS-13. This is Trump's biggest point. This relates to the clip as well. 25% say it's true. 20% say it's not true. So that really hasn't cut through the way they would like. He's a member of the MS-13 gang. 23% said that's true. 26% said it's not true. Once again,
Yep.
not working for Trump. He's a terrorist, which is what I mean, I think Pam Bondi in her sleep says that. She's constantly calling me a terrorist. 17% say it's true. 35% say it's not true. He's been given due process. 17% say it's true. 39% say it's not true. So Trump has completely lost the propaganda game on this. Completely. No matter how hard he's been going on it. And by the way, the students, the issue of students like Khalil Mahmood being deported.
Yeah.
Washington Post, 36% to 62% support deporting international students who have criticised US policy in the Middle East. New York Times also had 63% opposed as well. So those numbers, they're solid.
Yeah.
New York Times also had 31% to 52% approving the handling of Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case. They had 11% saying that Trump should be able to send US citizens to prison in El Salvador. They had 6% saying he should be able to ignore Supreme Court rulings. This is not working for Trump at all.
Yeah.
And then
We should revisit that list of things that are more popular. Than...
That's true, actually.
Yeah.
That's true. And they'll do for now. You keep on going.
There would be diseases that would be more popular.
My point is,
than that.
This has really hurt him. I mean, I got stuff on tariffs as well, of course. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But tariffs is obvious. The immigration one is not so obvious. And this is his strength. He is throwing away his strength right now.
He really is. Yeah. And, I mean, this is an interesting thing that's always been there about polling on this issue. It's Americans in the abstract tend to favour often quite hardline policies. But once you get into the actual human details of those, they back off. So they might favour mass deportation, but then you ask them about categories of who should be deported, and they are prepared to make all kinds of exceptions. And certainly when it gets into issues around due process and just blatant cruelty, people don't want to have anything to do with that. So they might favour hardline policies in the sense of if you can do something that just makes people not come here at all, right, this is why they still favour Trump on the border because all they're seeing is people just not showing up, then great, they like that because they don't have to see the human consequences of that. If they're actually shown the human consequences of hardline policies, they really tend to soften up.
Then on that note, let me point out, I mentioned tariffs. Let's just go into these a little bit for a second.
Yes.
Because, as you correctly said, the economy is not doing well for him. Reuters, 37% approval of handling the economy. YouGov, 41%. AP, 37%. Gallup, as you've had a look right here, 53% say their financial situation is getting worse, which is an all-time high in this series. The series has only been going 22 years, but across the recession.
Yeah.
And it's higher than the recession, as you can see. That's the dotted line if you're looking. The important thing here is that pair this up with the CBS poll. Only 53%, according to CBS, say the economy is getting worse right now, which means this can get a lot worse.
Oh, it
Trump.
definitely can.
This can get a lot worse for Trump.
Yeah.
New York Times had 21% saying so far he's made the economy better. 50% say he's made the economy worse.
Yes.
So far. And it can get so much worse. Okay, then we get the tariffs. According to the New York Times, 61% of voters say a president should not be able to impose tariffs without authorization from Congress. Yes.
Wow.
This
Read Article 1 of the Constitution.
This is the one I find most interesting. Fox News, 54% say Trump's policies are hurting the country to 32%. 51% say it's hurting the country in the long term to 40%. Now, the reason that's critical is because that is Trump's spin.
Yep.
Trump's spin is expect pain, but it's going to be good in the long run. The golden age is coming.
Yes.
According to Fox poll,
Yes.
they are not buying that.
No.
They're regarding they've got the same views about short-term and long-term, essentially. As far as propaganda goes, Gallup found 70% believe tariffs will ultimately cost the US more money than they generate. That's in the short term. In the long term, 62%. They're not buying it.
They really are not.
89% think higher tariffs are very or somewhat likely to raise consumer prices. That's been Trump's message. They don't raise consumer prices. 89%, according to Gallup, disagree with him.
Yeah.
So So when you put that all together, once again, his propaganda is not working on tariffs, and that is why you saw those numbers before going through the floor.
Yeah, and I mean, you've got to wonder what are people actually imagining when they imagine the manufacturing industry coming back. Like it's, as I said, the American manufacturing industry currently employs about 6.7% of the population. There was a time in the immediate post-war period where it employed about a third of the population, or 30% of the population. Does anybody believe that is actually coming back? I mean, that is a massive, massive leap of faith to believe that can come back. Scott Bessent has actually undermined this message by telling the textile industry that the jobs of the past are not coming back. Trump is focused on the jobs of the future.
Yes.
When people think jobs of the future, they think robots.
That's exactly what they think.
They think, the jobs are for people who can potentially program robots.
Yeah.
Or maybe like whip them if they start to rebel or something like that. But I don't put that much stock in Chinese internet trolling. But it has to be acknowledged, first of all, that Chinese internet trolling is of a far higher quality than American internet trolling. And one of the big memes that's been going around is, what would it actually look like Americans working in Chinese-style factories?
That was funny.
Yes, yeah. And, I mean, part of the serious point it brings home is this is not what Americans actually want to do.
Yeah.
This is not what Americans want their lives to be. They do not want to, assume the role in the global manufacturing industry that China has, because that is predicated on hard, cheap labour.
Well, the irony of it is
Yes.
that China doesn't even want that.
No,
role.
that China
They're
doesn't.
moving away from it.
China sees that as the past.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Vietnam's role as
Yes.
far as
Yeah,
China's
yeah.
concerned. So
Yes.
yeah, that was a very funny troll. But,
Yeah.
I want to turn with the polling to demographics for a second. Unless
Yes.
you want to talk more issues. Do you want to talk more issues?
No.
Or? No. Okay. I want to turn to demographics because they're interesting. It's early days to be breaking these down, but
Yes.
there are three really obvious trends.
Yep.
Number one,
Yep.
Trump is getting butchered on the independents in a massive way. Let
Yep.
me give you some numbers here. Fox News, he's down by, wait for it, this is the worst one, 47 points amongst independents, 26 to 73.
Yes. Yeah.
New York Times down 37 points, 29 to 66. CNN down 36 points, 31 to 67. UCOV down 29 points, 30 to 59. CBS down 28 points, 36 to 64. ABC, Washington Post down 25 points, 33 to 58. Gallup down 20 points, 37 to 57. Atlas Intel, we doing them? Hey, why not? 18 points down.
Atlas
39 to
Intel were the
57.
most accurate pollsters in 2024.
Well, they're the best for him here.
Yeah.
And Qantas, not the airline.
Yeah.
Qantas, minus 12, 41 to 53. So with this exception of the last two, it's just like it's record-breakingly bad across the park on independents.
Yeah.
18 to 29s. Now, he was looking really good in the election on them. He was only down by 4 points in the election amongst 18 to 29s. He was up amongst 18 and 29 men. I don't think we're ready to break down 18 and 29 men yet, but 18 and 29s all over.
Yes.
He has 33% approval. What Lockie just put up now is the election, from the election to now.
Yes.
You can see he's dropped 23 points amongst the 18 and 29s versus he's dropped 11 points in the 30 to 44s, and he's dropped 7 points in the 45 to 64s, and he's dropped 11 points in 65 pluses. So it's all in the 18 and 29s.
So he's even lost Gen X.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he's behind on Gen X.
Gen X was his strongest generation.
Yeah. And The Economist, YouGov, approval amongst 18 and 29s, 33% approval, the 57%, so that's 24 points down. Pew approval, 36%. Both Harvard Youth Poll and the New York Times had 20% support for tariffs amongst 18 and 29s. Like, that's where he was the lowest.
Yes.
Actually, he was terrible on immigration as well. Like the Abrego Garcia stuff polls terribly amongst 18 and 29s.
Yes.
In fact, 18 and 29s, In the New York Times poll, only 37% of them support deporting illegal immigrants at all. 37%.
Yeah.
Like at this point in time, it's still a majority position for the rest of America.
Yes, yeah.
So that's the 1829s. And the other group I want to just flag, early days, Hispanics. Pew has 27% approval amongst Hispanics.
Wow.
CNN has 28% approval amongst Hispanics. They're not big fans of the immigration agenda, but I'll tell you what they really don't like. Tariffs. The tariffs. I remember hearing the Hispanic whisperers during the election period saying the reason Biden's doing so bad amongst Hispanics is because they are economic voters. And they are definitely demonstrating that right now. They do not like the tariffs at all. So that's some demographics for you.
Look, I would also say independents are by and large economic voters.
Yeah.
And young people are also economic voters. There's too much explanation of young people's vote in terms of inexperience or innocence or certain ideological proclivities. No, they are economic voters as well. They're the most economically precarious segment of the population. They're the ones who are at the front lines of inflation and job losses.
Yeah.
So they are definitely economic voters.
Fair enough. I have 3 nuggets left, and then you can just say anything you want.
Yep.
These are just randoms. Number 1, PRRI had asked a very different question to the rest of the pollsters, and it's an interesting one. They asked who felt President Trump was a dangerous dictator whose power should be limited before he destroys American democracy. Interesting question. Would you care to guess the percentage of people who feel that?
51.
52.
Ah!
Very good. Well done. Including 56% of independents.
Yeah.
And including, this is the best part, I'll remind you the quote, President Trump is a dangerous dictator whose power should be limited before he destroys American democracy, including 17% of Republicans. So there we go. The Washington Post also felt that 64% say he's gone too far in trying to expand the powers of his presidency.
Yep.
And this is my other little nugget. There are 2 things in the Washington Post poll I found interesting, which no one else asked about. Increasing the federal government's role in how private universities operate, 28% approval to 70%. Reducing federal funding for medical research. I hope you're paying attention to this, Democrats. 21% approval to 77% disapproval. You will have to work very hard to find a less popular policy than that.
Yes.
That's a sleeper for Trump, I reckon. I reckon
Yes.
Democrats should be going real hard on that one.
Yes. And speaking about Democrats and less popular,
Oh, yeah.
Democrats are the only thing less popular than Trump.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Pew had 43% favourables for the Republican Party generally.
Yep.
To 38% of the Democratic Party. In terms of confidence in individuals,
Yes.
Gallup
Yeah.
had 36% confidence in Mike Johnson.
Yep.
The 36% have confidence, by the way.
Yes.
33% have confidence in John Thune. Amazingly, 33% have heard of John
Yeah, I
Thune.
was going to say.
30% have confidence in Hakeem Jeffries, and Chuck Schumer, 25% have confidence in.
Ooh.
I'll tell you those 25%, they don't live in New York.
Yeah.
Because while New York Democrats favoured Chuck Schumer,
Yeah.
they had 73% approval amongst New York Democrats, I'm talking about here, Democrats in December 2024.
Yes.
Now he has 52% approval amongst New York Democrats.
Yeah.
Should Chuck Schumer stay as Senate leader? New York Democrats, 50% say yes. And I'll play a little clip for you to round this a little bit off on Harry Enton. It's just, I could tell you the numbers, but Harry Enton does it in a classic Harry Enton way.
Yes.
Hello, Democrats on Dem leaders in Congress. The belief that they will do the right thing when it comes to the economy. Last year at this time, 80% believed that the Democratic leaders in Congress would do the right thing when it comes to the economy. And keep in mind, this is Democrats. Look at where we are now. That number has been slashed in half to just 39%. Holy Toledo, that is the lowest number by far in Gallup polling. The lowest previous was just 60%, which is 21 points higher than this. Democrats hate what their congressional leaders in Washington are doing right now on the key issue of the day, the economy, and their confidence has fallen through the floor, Mr. Berman.
I need to drink more energy drinks before I do my
I was
wall
going to say,
segment.
someone get that young man a glass of warm milk.
Look, I mean, it was hilarious the way he did it, but man, those numbers.
Yeah, they're bad. Now, like I've said before, after a tough loss in any country, the opposition is always a complete rabble for the first year. And you can't expect that much more. But Democrats have actively been sabotaging themselves in many respects. I think Schumer is saboteur in chief.
I was going to say that I actually don't think Democrats should be too. I mean, I think you're right.
Yes,
but I don't think Democrats should be too worried about that because a lot of those people, as I just demonstrated, are Democrats.
Yeah.
Like a lot of those people who are against them are Democrats, which means if there was an election was held tomorrow, Democrats would do fine. All those Democrats would vote for the Democrats.
Yes,
Right there, and once we get into election zone, it's about who's in power.
Yes.
You vote against who's in power. It's not about whether you like the opposition or not. The number of times 2014, people despised the Republican Party in 2014.
Yeah.
And they completely cleaned up in the midterms.
Totally.
So I actually don't think it actually matters
in
a
electoral
lot.
terms, yes. Yeah.
But
if midterms were held tomorrow, I think Democrats would win.
Yeah, but you'd prefer to not suck.
You would really prefer to not suck. And one thing, I mean, there are a lot of things that people are frustrated with. Primarily, they are really frustrated with what they see as a spineless response to Trump. And, you know, with Gavin Newsom positioning himself for a presidential run, basically on a platform of spinelessness, on a platform of let's just hope that people hate Trump and Republicans so much that we don't have to offer anything.
And by the way, on a podcast of spinelessness as well. I don't know if you've listened to that podcast.
No.
My God.
Well, there's no way I'm going to listen to that. But and Newsom is symptomatic of a total lack of generational renewal in the Democratic Party. Newsom should be gone by this point. He like most of them should be gone, but most of them just should have slunk out the exit after 2024. But most of them are determined to hold on for as long as possible in the misguided belief that there's a shot for them somewhere.
Well, to be fair, that is one person's fault, and that is Joe Biden's.
Yes,
Joe
that is
Biden took their slot.
Yes.
Gavin Newsom's slot was not now. It was 4 years ago and 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Joe Biden took that slot. And he shouldn't have run again, and he screwed up. Like the 2024 primaries should have been Newsom's primary, should have been Whitmer's primary. She's going to be stale in 4 years as well.
Yeah.
Like he took a slot that belonged to someone else.
Well, so Whitmer is taking damage because of the deals that she's cutting with Trump because as governor of Michigan, she's one of the few Democrats who is really worried about saying anything negative about tariffs. So, yeah.
Anyway. You have anything to say about polling?
No.
Well, look, let's go on in a related topic. We've already started talking about the tariffs and so forth. Why don't we talk about the trade war? Because we're at an interesting stage of the trade war where everyone knows this isn't working out for Trump.
Yes.
It's a question of what he does about it.
Yeah. And, I mean, the biggest arena of failure is China.
Yep.
Okay, because that's where the tariffs were ramped up and ramped up again. Even as he was backing off tariffs on other countries, he kept ramping them up on China. Now, China's response was one-for-one retaliation until China got to the point where they said, we're not raising tariffs anymore because the number is meaningless now. Once you get to more than 100% tariffs, you basically don't have a tariff anymore. You've got a ban.
Yeah, it's an embargo. That's what it is.
We've said from the beginning that it's not just about who's going to take the most economic damage. Because if you just look at it in that way, then Canada would be taking more economic damage than the US. China would be taking more economic damage from the US. It is your willingness to fight, right? And that's the willingness of the population to endure that kind of sacrifice. And it's the insensitivity of the leadership to political pressure.
Yep.
Now, from all accounts, China is in a much stronger position to fight the trade war on those two counts, partly because they've been preparing for it for years. They have been massively reducing their dependence on American agricultural goods, Right? They used to be 70% of soybeans were coming from the US. It's now 20% coming from the US. They have what I've seen described as a Great Wall of pork to protect the price of meat from.
Sounds gross.
Now, this is not to say that it's going to be painless. I mean, China's economy is in all kinds of all kinds of trouble. But at the end of the day, Xi Jinping has much less domestic political pressure to worry about than Trump does. It's not that domestic political pressure doesn't matter in China. It's not that public opinion doesn't matter at all in China. It's just the kind of pressure points that leaders experience directly. Trump is going to experience far more of them than Xi Jinping.
And the pressure is obviously going to increase at a higher rate for Trump.
Yes.
Like whatever pressure Xi is feeling right now, and I'm sure there's a bit.
Yeah.
In 12 months' time, we all know Trump's in the gravitational pull of the midterms then.
Yes.
He's going to be feeling a much more intense pressure then.
Yes.
And that's the best case scenario if you can hold off for 12 months. The worst case scenario is they go into a recession in about 2 months.
Yes.
And then Trump's going to be feeling even more pressure.
Yes. Yeah. And looking at how it's going with China, you just get the feeling that this really wasn't very well thought out. They didn't. They didn't take into account the kind of levers that China has, such as, for example, just completely cutting off critical minerals that are available almost nowhere else and which are increasingly critical in defense manufacturing.
Military drones, consumer electronics, battery-powered vehicles. You can't make any of them without the rare earth metals and rare earth magnets.
Yes. And so you've only got to look at the changes in rhetoric to realize what's going on here. Okay, so China was the first country to just immediately raise tariffs genuinely reciprocally in response to the United States. Right, and this led to a lot of bluster from Trump saying, China's done the wrong thing. China's panicked. Nobody else had better do that because you're going to see what happens to China. Okay, he maintained that very brave face for about a week or so. He was saying things like, we've cancelled the talks that China requested. Now, there's no evidence that China was formally requesting talks. Okay, like everybody else, I think there are Chinese foreign policy operatives who are looking for ways of communicating, but it wasn't like the Chinese leadership was asking the American leadership for talks, right? And China was like, we didn't ask for talks. Now, Trump is actually saying we're having talks with China, and China's saying we're not having talks.
Yes.
Yeah. Trump was initially saying, China really wants a deal, but they just don't know how to ask. Yeah. Now he's actually claiming that they are negotiating with China, and China's saying no.
Well, even more than that, he's trying to explicitly negotiate with them.
Yes.
Through the media without them engaging at all.
That's right.
Like, have a look at this.
Yes.
145% is very high. And it won't be that high. It's not going to be that high. It got up to that. We were talking about fentanyl, where, various elements built it up to 145. No, it won't be anywhere near that high. It'll come down substantially, but it won't be zero. It used to be zero.
Then the next day, the Wall Street Journal had an article clearly leaked out by the Trump press. The Trump office. The Trump administration is considering slashing its steep tariffs on Chinese imports, in some cases by more than half, in a bid to de-escalate tensions with Beijing. They've roiled global trade and investment, according to people familiar with the matter. One senior White House official said the China tariffs were likely to come down to between roughly 50 and 65%. They're negotiating themselves down through leaks. That's what I call blinking.
Yeah. So... And I mean, a few weeks ago, it was all about what Trump really wants is, for Xi Jinping to ask for a meeting first. He doesn't want to be the one who asks for it. He doesn't be the one who wants to make that call. I think by now everybody's realized that even that incredibly minimal face-saving condition is not going to happen.
Yeah.
I've got a friend, Sir Yu, who's at the University of Alberta. And he describes US-China conflict as it's a conflict between an honor culture and a face culture, right? But having said that, Trump, I think, in some ways, is actually far more himself about face culture than honor culture. Trump doesn't have the kind of preoccupations with long-term credibility that you get in honor culture, with avoiding humiliation, with having to ultimately rectify every wrong. He doesn't actually have that, right? He is much more about he is prepared to accept face-saving measures. He actually, in some ways, seems to be. I think she is right about it's honor culture versus face culture. But in some ways, just Trump's record is all about saving face all the time. The problem is he is dealing with someone who is a total product of face culture and is never, ever going to back down on this point, because that would be his whole legitimacy out the window.
Well, I'll add a few other things with China, and that is that an advantage that China has is that Trump has completely burnt his own deal-making credibility.
Yeah.
Because remember, America, what they're trying to do, their tactic is to try and build pressure on China by isolating them with making deals with everyone else.
Yes.
Right? Especially in Asia. But why would any country risk spurning China for America's sake after the last couple of months?
Yes.
China at least seems like a reliable bet right now compared to America, which could just do anything. You just got no idea what they'll do. America has not only already turned on every one of its supposed friends this year, but Trump's already broken a bunch of deals that he himself brokered in his first term.
Yes.
So why would you risk breaking off economic relations with China for a deal that America might break anyway in 6 months' time?
Yeah.
And like China has made, Trump has made very clear you cannot trust his deals.
No.
So then making people try and spurn China for one of the deals you can't trust is a poor strategy.
It's a very poor strategy.
The other thing I'd say is, you may not know this, it's interesting. Now, I don't think this is playing a big role, but it's just a cute little aside.
Yeah.
On TikTok, Chinese manufacturers are selling directly through TikTok. Right? They're actually pitching to American buyers.
Yeah.
So you have this very weird cycle happening where Trump is ignoring Congress to punish Chinese manufacturers with tariffs, right?
Yes.
Trump's also ignoring Congress to reward China by keeping TikTok open. And China is using that TikTok to undermine the tariffs that are supposed to punish them.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
But anyway, you got anything else to say about China?
Not about China specifically.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, then there are some other areas on the
Yes.
tariffs I think are interesting. Why don't you move into the next area you want to talk about? Or?
Well, so I just wanted to say, related to this.
Yeah.
Okay, so the reaction of the bond markets was,
okay.
as we said, was widely credited with forcing him to back down on, on a lot of tariffs. But I think it's not just about the tariffs with the bond markets. It's everything that you were talking about his unwillingness to stick to agreements, his unwillingness to stick to everything. It's that kind of uncertainty that the bond markets hate. And I think as well, like the degradation of the rule of law on a daily basis, that's not going to give any comfort to the bond markets either.
No.
If the more and more restraints on Trump are just getting kicked away or ignored, then that gives him more latitude not to stick to agreements. And I don't think the bond market's going to like that in the long term either.
That makes sense. I want to talk a little bit about the deals, the deals side of that.
The deals.
Just to remind you,
Yes.
Scott, we're led to believe that the reason why there was a detente at all was because of Scott Bessent just begging Trump
Yes.
to just give it up.
Yes.
And he convinced Trump to step down from the Liberation Day tariffs by sucking up to him about how great a deal maker he is, how all these countries are desperate to make deals.
Oh, yes.
So Trump gave Scott Bessent time to strike these deals.
Yes.
90 days.
Yes.
P. Navarro came straight out and immediately promised 90 deals in 90 days, which wasn't helpful. Which screws Bessent, because it's not Navarro who has to make the deals, it's Bessent who has to make the deals. That can't be done. I need to be very clear about this. Usually it takes about 6 months to just develop negotiating positions and to determine your objectives, because you got to consult with a lot of different interest groups,
Yes.
right? Before you know what your position actually is. Then the negotiations, they often take years. Once you've made a deal that Congress can actually approve of, because that's their job, the International Trade Commission needs to analyze it, which also takes months. Even the fastest recent trade agreement, straightforward agreement with a tiny country, Jordan, that still took more than 90 days. And that's the simplest trade agreement they've had for years and years and years, right? Just revising the car and steel parts alone of the South Korea-US free trade agreement in Trump's first term took 8 months.
Yes.
Just for those two industries. The USMCA took over 2 years, even on, inverted commas, Trump time. And that's with all of the US trade reps working just on those deals. Now they're divided amongst over 100 countries.
Allegedly.
Yeah, well, I'll get to that. That's just for trade. But Trump's also thrown in negotiating non-tariff barriers as well, like GSTs and regulations and cultural priorities.
Yes.
These are going to complicate any negotiation.
Yeah.
They'll make them
Pharmaceutical
impossible.
benefits scheme.
Exactly. That'll be simple, won't it? So you've got this fiction that all these deals are going to be done, and poor old Scott Bessent's one who's got to get them done.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Trump is running with that fiction as hard as he can because he likes the sound of it. Lockie, I'm going to have to call you over here, mate. I'd like you to read, I want to read an excerpt from a Time interview.
Sure, okay.
Where Trump ran with this fiction in a particularly amusing way.
All right.
You're in the Lockie box? You got the script there?
I'm in the Lockie box. I'm
Okay.
looking at my script.
So lock box?
I've got character notes here.
Okay, all right. So I will play Time, and so I'll play Trump, you play Time, okay? All right, go for it, Lockie.
Your trade advisor, Peter Navarro, said 90 deals in 90 days is possible. We're now 13 days into the point from when you lifted the discounted reciprocal tariffs. There's 0 deals so far. Why is that?
No, there's many deals.
When are they going to be announced?
You have to understand, I'm dealing with all the companies, very friendly companies. We're meeting with China. We're doing fine with everybody. But ultimately, I've made all the deals.
Not one deal has been announced yet. When are you going to announce them?
I've made 200 deals.
You've made 200 deals?
100%.
Ah, can you share with whom?
Because the deal is a deal that I choose. View it differently. We're a department store and we set the price. I meet with the companies and I set a fair price. Well, I consider it to be a fair price and they can pay it or they don't have to pay it. They don't have to do business with the United States. But I set a tariff on countries. Some have been horrible to us. Some have been okay. Nobody's been great. Nobody's been great. Everybody took advantage of us. What I'm doing is I will, at a certain point in the not too distant future, I'll set a fair price of tariffs for different countries. These are countries. Some of them have made hundreds of billions of dollars. Some of them have just made a lot of money. Very few of them have made nothing because the United States has been ripped off by almost every country in the world, in the entire world. So I'll set a price. And when I set a price, and I will set fairly according to the statistics and according to everything else. For instance, do they have the VAT system in play? Do they charge us tariffs? How much are they charging us? How much have they been charging us? Many, many different factors, right? How are we being treated by that country? And then I will set a tariff. And are we paying for their military? You know, as an example, we have Korea. We pay billions of dollars for the military. Japan, billions for those and others. But that, I'm going to keep us a separate item, the paying of the military. Germany, we have 50,000 soldiers.
I'm just curious, why don't you announce these deals you've solidified?
I'd say over the next 3 to 4 weeks. And we're finished, by the way.
You're finished?
We'll be finished.
Oh, you will be finished in 3 to 4 weeks.
I'll be finished. Now, some countries may come back and ask for an adjustment, and I'll consider that. But I'll basically be, with great knowledge, setting. Ready? We're a department store, a giant department store, the biggest department store in history. Everyone wants to come in and take from us. They're going to come in and they're going to pay a price for taking our treasure, for taking our jobs, for doing all these things. But what I'm doing with the tariffs is people are coming in and they're building at levels you've never seen before. We have $7 trillion of new plants, factories and other things, investment coming to the United States. And if you look back at past presidents, nobody was anywhere near that. And this is in 3 months. At this point in time, Lockie has fallen asleep.
And scene.
So that's now that's obviously ridiculous because there are less than 200 countries in the world. I don't know if he's doing deals with the Penguin Islands, but And the department store analogy makes no sense.
Yeah.
Other than both
Say,
department stores and tariffs
I
involve
really
prices.
hope people are paying attention to these moronic analogies that he's using. So
loves
there
them.
was the department store.
Yep.
There was the idea that we can just get out of half our debt by saying, no, we're not going to pay what we owe. We're going to pay less because people are always including fat in the bills that they're sending us. When what the issue with government debt is actually bonds.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't. Which, by the way, might have been another thing that the bond market paid attention to. That interview with Elon Musk nodding along next to him like a bobblehead while he talked about just not paying debt. Bet the bond markets loved that. Yes. Remember that he went bankrupt running a casino?
Yeah.
The one thing that, like, you're not able to go bankrupt running, he somehow managed to do it.
You call it a casino. I see it like a giant department store. Yeah. Now, look, I mean, I don't know why he loves that analogy so much. He's used it a lot. He thinks it's a winner. But that 200 deal fiction, it convinced no one, as you're about to hear from the next question I'm about to play. This is on the Sunday shows. Poor old Scott Percent. He had to try and answer this question. He didn't even bother to pretend that the 200 deal thing was real. He just didn't even try.
Yes.
He said that he has made 200 deals on tariffs. 200 deals? Who has he made deals with? Is there actually any deal at this point?
I believe that he is referring to sub-deals within the negotiations we're doing. And, Martha, if there are 180...
But those aren't actual deals.
Martha, if there are 180 countries, there are 18 important trading partners. Let's put China to the side because that's a special negotiation. There's 17 important trading partners, and we have a process in place over the next 90 days to negotiate with them. Some of those are moving along very well, especially with the Asian countries.
So, sub-deals.
Yeah.
So, in other words, 200 countries have agreed to Trump's condition that during negotiations, lunch is going to be cold McDonald's.
That's fair for you to focus on that.
Yes.
I'm focusing on the fact that Scott Percent just clearly said there are only 17 deals. That's what he said.
Yes.
He said there are 18 key deals, and one of them's China. Let's put that to one side,
Yes.
he says.
Yep.
Once again, giving the game away that they're definitely not negotiating with China.
Yeah.
So 17 deals. And we're now a month into the 90 days, and not one of those 17 deals has been announced yet. This is why they are presumably focusing on term sheets outlining vague commitments instead of signed agreements.
Yes.
And focusing in particular on Asian countries like Japan, India, Vietnam, South Korea, etc.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Now, look, to be fair, they're probably going to do a deal at some point in time. I mean, they're talking about doing a deal on India. Percent's been saying, I think we're very close on India.
Yeah.
India, in a funny way, is easier to negotiate with than many other countries because they have very high tariffs and lots of tariffs. So it's much easier to confront the direct tariffs rather than the non-tariff barrier issue I mentioned before. Anyway, okay, let's say do a deal in India in 2 weeks' time. All right, you're halfway through your time now, and you've done one out of the 17 deals. And the thing is, they want to get a wriggle on because the crunch might be coming sooner than 90 days.
Yes.
Which is the next thing I want to talk about. Do you want to talk about the deals before I go to the...
No.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
The urgency could be coming extremely soon because we've kind of settled into a nice settling pattern. Just going, oh, yeah, the Liberation Day came and it went, and yeah, this isn't great. The GDP's gone down. Look at that. Isn't that a shame? Isn't that interesting? But things are happening below the surfaces.
Yes.
And they're about to become above the surface. It takes about 30 days for container ships to travel from China to the West Coast.
Yes.
So up until now, the ports have been still taking in ships that set sail before April 9. But there's a ship tracking system called Port Optimizer that's projected a 44% drop in ships year over year scheduled to arrive in Southern California ports next week. That is when the crunch begins.
Yes.
It doesn't end then. That's when it begins. It'll get worse for another month because it takes 45 days to get to Houston. It takes 2 months to get to New York. So for the next 5 weeks after next week, shipping is going to continue to drop off further. Then you add another few days for each port before trucking demand starts to plummet from that port.
Yes.
Then, so for the West Coast, in middle to late May, you start seeing empty shelves. Once again, they will get worse for the entire next month as it spreads from port to port.
Yes.
Then late May, then beginning late May, early June, you start seeing layoffs in first the trucking sectors, then the warehouse sectors, then the retail sector, and that will spread for another month.
By the way, the retail sector employs a lot more Americans than the manufacturing sector.
Oh, it does. It does.
Employs about 10% of people.
So what you're talking about is basically from June, during the month of June, there will be a gradient of the economy being increasingly impacted. So we're going to know how much of a problem these tariffs are in about a month to about 2 months from now. I mean, we'll start seeing the effects next week.
Yes.
But it's just going to get worse and worse and worse over the next 2 months.
Yes.
And whenever Trump gives in, because we all know he's eventually going to give in.
Yes.
Whenever he gives in, you then add another month or two extra lag time before the pain stops because it takes that long for the ships to arrive again.
Yes.
So Trump has basically baked in a month of pain at this point, no matter what he does, and it will probably reach its peak at around the magic 90-day mark.
Yes.
So I'm guessing he's going to be seriously considering declaring victory and backing down at that point in time, I imagine.
I'd say so.
But if he sticks at it, the National Retail Federation estimates overall imports will fall by about 20% in the second half of this year at current tariff levels. So that's the pain that's coming.
Yeah. And I think it was the Washington Post had an article about what this means for Christmas.
Yeah.
Because now is actually the time when retailers are stocking up on Christmas items, believe it or not. It's because of this is the time they're ordering Christmas items.
Really?
Yeah,
Well, you know who produces pretty much every toy in America?
China.
Yeah.
Now, Trump has addressed this.
Yes.
He addressed it today.
Yeah, what's
He
that?
said, well, we're buying a lot of stuff from China we don't need, so maybe kids can only have 2 dolls instead of 30 dolls, and maybe those dolls will cost a couple of bucks more.
That always works, that strategy.
Yeah. But just also imagine, bringing out that Christmas soundbite now. Like, that's going to get endless play around Christmas time.
Or, alternatively, rather than getting 30 dolls, maybe get 2 dolls and 28 of those sticks and spinny circles.
Yes.
You know those ones they used to play with in the 14th century? I reckon America can get them. They're cheap. They're cheap.
But I mean, one of the things that this all brings home is, okay, there are many things to complain about with multilateral trade negotiations.
Yeah.
Their lack of transparency, the lack of control that people have, their imperviousness to any kind of domestic political pressure, the sort of brutal one-size-fits-allness of them. But the advantage that they have is that they are a massive system that's in place that creates a lot of certainty and a lot of stability. Right? It avoids this kind of uncertainty that you get with turning everything into bilateral negotiations premised on threats of tariffs. Yeah. So, Trump is probably right to think that at least in a few cases, he's going to be able to get much better bilateral deals out of countries like India and Vietnam than what the multilateral system would have offered. But one of the reasons why the US pursued a multilateral system was because of the vast efforts that are required to negotiate bilateral deals, because of the kind of uncertainty that you get, and because the US is not the only country that can play that game.
Yes.
Okay, if the US wants to turn everything into bilateral relations, it's going to find other countries, including China, can play that game as well. Yeah. And at the moment, China, by presenting itself as everybody's best friend, like, sure, nobody believes that. But as you say, if China can just offer something slightly more stable at the moment, a lot of countries are going to take that.
Absolutely.
The multilateral system, sure, it wasn't working for all the American people, but for the United States as a country, it was definitely working in its favor. That's why they put it in place. Yeah.
And you can tell that Trump knows that he's in trouble here because he's really starting to sweat. Like, I'm not sure if you saw this week, the story about Amazon. It was in Punch Bowl. Amazon was going to be displaying next to the price of each product how much of the cost was derived from tariffs.
Yeah.
Carolyn Levitt absolutely went nuts.
It was reported this morning that Amazon will soon display a little number next to the price of each product that shows how much the Trump tariffs are adding to the cost of each product. So isn't that a perfect, crystal clear demonstration that it's the American consumer and not China who is going to have to pay for these policies?
I will take this since I just got off the phone with the president about Amazon's announcement. This is a hostile and political act by Amazon. Why didn't Amazon do this when the Biden administration hiked inflation to the highest level in 40 years? And I would also add that it's not a surprise because, as Reuters recently wrote, Amazon has partnered with a Chinese propaganda arm.
Meanwhile, while she's saying that, Trump is apparently simultaneously calling Jeff Bezos personally to chew him out. And the results, I have to say, were immediate. Suddenly it was all a misunderstanding. A spokesperson from Amazon said the team that runs our ultra-low-cost Amazon Hall store they considered listing import charges on certain products. This was never a consideration for the main Amazon site. Nothing has been implemented on any Amazon properties. The theory is Amazon Hall, which I hadn't heard of until now, allows you to become your own personal importer.
Right.
With direct-to-consumer shipping. So so maybe the theory is that they disclose those tariffs because you have to pay the import fees yourself.
Yep.
I don't know. That's a theory.
Yep.
Either way, this is what Trump had to say.
Jeff Bezos was very nice. He was terrific. He solved the problem very quickly. And he did the right thing, and he's a good guy.
You make up your own mind what you think happened there. All I would say is that the Trump administration, to me, seems extremely sensitive about people knowing how much they are paying extra for these tariffs. Maybe they've seen the Institution in Taxation and Economic Policy paper. I doubt it. But it suggests that the current tariffs would mean the bottom 20% of Americans, that's those making less than $29,000 a year, will be facing an effective tax hike of 6.2%. The middle 20% looking at 5% tax hike, and the top 1% looking at 1.7% tax hike. And if there was any doubt about sensitivity, you mentioned before the GDP figures. I mean, look, I'll put up a graph there. You can see that it went down by 0.3%. It kind of stands out a little bit there compared to the 2s and 3s that we're used to from the last few years of Biden. Oh, by the way, to be fair, you already mentioned this, but I do want to emphasize it, that it's because there was a huge amount of imports.
Yes. That was what.
Yeah. Net exports.
That counts against GDP.
Yeah. Net exports were a 5% drag on the final figure.
Yeah.
That's the biggest quarterly drag from net exports on the record since at least World War II. So it's because of that, because people are anticipating tariffs. Also a tiny fall in government spending as well. So that number is a little distorted. But regardless, Trump could have said that.
Yes.
He could have said what I just said. And he could have, and some of his people did say that. Some of his people said, well, next quarter will be fine because we'll get it back. But Trump felt compelled to issue the most incredibly laughable spin, which was, this is Biden's stock market, not Trump's. I didn't take over until January 20th. Tariffs will soon start kicking in and companies are starting to move into the USA in record numbers. Our country will boom, but we have to get rid of the Biden overhang. This will take a while, has nothing to do with the tariffs, only they left us with bad numbers, but when the boom begins, it'll be like no other. Be patient. And the reason that's so laughable is because after the last quarter saw strong growth from October to December 2024, this is what Trump tweeted then. This is the Trump stock market because my polls against Biden are so good that investors are projecting that I will win and that will drive the market up. Everything else is terrible. Watch the Middle East and record-setting inflation has already taken its toll. Make America great again. Full carpet mode, all caps.
Yeah.
Remember when Trump used to talk about the stock market?
Yes.
It's been a real long time since he mentioned the market. But anyway, the fact he feels compelled to be doing that shit.
Yes.
He's telling you that he's sweating.
Yeah.
Hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got anything else to say about this topic?
No.
All right. Yeah, look, I'll leave Scott Percent. I had a few more Scott Percent grabs. He's really working hard, that guy.
Yes.
I had a grab here where he says that America first means doing just doing what they were doing before. Let's play it.
I wish to be clear. America first does not mean America alone. To the contrary, it is a call for deeper collaboration and mutual respect among trade partners. Far from stepping back, America First seeks to expand U.S. leadership in international institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. By embracing a stronger leadership role, America First seeks to restore fairness to the international economic system.
Yeah, America First is all about international institutions.
That's right.
Like the IMF and the World Bank. Sorry, Scott. If this all turns to shit, you know who Trump's going to blame. It ain't going to be him. I'll tell you that. Poor old Scotty. Okay. All right. That's enough on that topic, unless you got more.
No.
No. Okay.
Stats Nugget.
I've got a Trump 100 Days stats nugget for you here, Dave. And we've said some of these before, but I'm putting them all together. In his first 3 months, Trump has signed how many executive orders, do you think?
Oh, it's like 200 or something.
It's ballpark, but a little bit below. 142 executive orders, which is, needless to say, an all-time record for the first 100 days. Previous record by FDR, I should have asked you to guess that, 99 executive orders.
Yeah, I knew that one.
In the first 100 days.
Yes.
But, of course, FDR signed 76 bills into law.
That's right.
And as we discussed with Jared, Trump signed 5.
5.
Really, it was a half a bill when you break them down, really. Biden reached 142 executive orders himself in September 2024. Yeah, a few months ago. Obama, even less. Obama reached 142 in December 2012. The election was already over.
And can we please just point out, signing executive orders is not the sign of strength that Trump seems to think it is.
Yeah, this is why I made the point about the bills signing the bills. That's what matters.
Signing the bills is important. Yeah. We had an amazing statement from J.D. Vance today about all the other presidents, why Trump is so much more of a man than all of the other presidents.
Oh, yeah, I saw this. Yeah, read it out.
Vice President J.D. Vance said during Wednesday's cabinet meeting that most presidents pictured in portraits displayed in the Oval Office were placeholders and not men of action. You sit in the Oval Office and you see these portraits of presidents past. And let's be honest, most of them have been placeholders. They've been people who have allowed their staff to sign executive orders with AutoPen instead of men of action, Vance said. And the reason the media attacks this administration as chaotic is because the president is solving the problems the American people set out to solve. Now, we don't really need to go that much further into the vast project that is the self-degradation of J.D. Vance. But I just love this image of history he's setting up, that the presidents are divided into the few men of action who signed their own executive orders, and then the rest of them going all the way back to, I don't know, John Quincy Adams, who were getting their staff to sign executive orders with auto pens. In other words, the only thing that presidents do is sign executive orders, and Trump's much more of a man because he signs his own in front of the cameras.
Well, he certainly kicks some ass.
It's J.D. Vance, he's like a character in a storybook who's just wandering from fantasy land to fantasy land, trying to find the right that one where he'll be welcome. And I don't know what fantasy land he's wandering in at the moment.
That phrase, men of action, it reminds me very much of those noughties kind of parody ads, like the Old Spice ad or the Real American Heroes from Bud Light. You know, like the men of action. Which is, it's a 15-year more recent pop culture reference than most of Trump's pop culture references. So
that is very true.
That is advancing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if that's the case, I mean, you're right, the logic, which just shows how much Trump kicks ass, because Trump's 142 executive orders is more than 15 early presidents combined.
Yes.
Including George Washington himself. So well done.
And it even included a bill of attainder. Did Washington do that?
No.
No.
Not a man of action.
No.
I'll tell you where Trump is a world beater, though. We'll all agree on this.
Yeah.
Okay. Forget about the bills versus executive actions thing.
255
255 lawsuits against various Trump policies so far, including 108 different rulings that have blocked or temporarily frozen one of Trump's executive orders.
That is an achievement.
Favorable orders, on the other hand, favorable court orders, orders on his behalf, 30. So
there you go.
So there you go. That's
quite the
100
ratio.
days.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to do a little bit of immigration. I've got a lot of immigration here. I'm going to do a little bit of immigration, looking at the clock. And then I know we've got a while, but I just want to make sure we get to whatever you've got left over.
Canadian election.
Canadian election. Okay. So I'll do a bit of immigration, and then we'll get to the Canadian election, and then we'll see where we're at. Okay. All right. Let's start off with Abrego Garcia because he seems relevant.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So a bit of an update. We are learning more about him all the time. Like I said to you before, I am becoming fairly convinced that he is actually an MS-13 member. Not that I think it matters about how you treat him, but you might recall, you won't hear, but I talked to Melina last week. I described the report about Abrego Garcia being pulled over for speeding in 2022. And in his car, he had 8 guys with no luggage, and they were traveling from Texas to Maryland. And his wife said he might have been just driving them to do some construction work. But the guy who pulled them over, the trooper, was highly suspicious there might have been human trafficking. I said at the time, sounds like a suspicious situation, but I want to know why this allegation never made it to a courtroom. Because if it's so clear,
yes,
you'd use that in court, wouldn't you? This week we heard more about the encounter from the New York Post, whether it's real or not. According to the New York Post, when he was pulled over, he said the car was owned by, quote, his boss at his construction job. Turned out the guy who owned the car was an illegal immigrant who had just been convicted of people smuggling. And they already had a record of that car being suspected of being used by that guy for human trafficking. So that is quite a suspicious incident, I would have thought, generally speaking. Also this week, we found out about a lawsuit that someone dug up over child custody between Abrego Garcia's wife and her ex in 2018. 2018 is the year before he was first arrested.
Yes.
This presumably is the ex that she accused of domestic violence. I don't know that for a fact, though. Now, I don't want to get into their relationship. I don't know what was going on with them, her and her ex. But the relevant bit was, as part of the complaint, he filled out in his own handwriting, their ex, that the children were in serious danger with his wife. Why? Because, quote, she is dating a gang member. This is the year before Abrego Garcia was first arrested. Right?
Hang on, who said?
His wife's ex-husband described him as a gang member.
So the one who committed domestic abuse.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Clearly a very reliable source.
I'm not saying that this is proof.
So we've got the New York Post.
Yeah.
We've got a wife beater who's resentful of his ex-wife's new boyfriend.
But where'd gang member come from?
That sounds like the kind of accusation that could be thrown at anybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe.
And especially someone from El Salvador. Yeah, it's a racist slur, Chaz.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just because someone says something, it doesn't mean there has to be any truth to it whatsoever.
I know that, Dave. It's all circumstantial. But just when you add up enough circumstantial evidence, I'm Mr. Court here, right?
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that you just ignore due process. I'm saying in terms of my personal suspicions about whether he actually is a gang member or not, I think he might be a gang member. The tattoos, the MS-13 tattoos, we should actually have a look at that. This is the photo that Trump we're about to laugh at, right?
Yes,
Okay, so we can see here you got we showed this last week as well.
Yes,
That you got the marijuana, you got the smiley, you got the cross, you got the skull, and someone has labelled them, like someone presumably from DHS has labelled them, or DOJ, labelled them M for marijuana, S for smiley, 1 for, because the cross is long, I guess, 3, even though there are 4 holes in the skull, say, let's just ignore the mouth. There's 3 holes. That's their labelling, right? Like I said last week, I don't think the person who produced that photo was trying to convince anyone that the symbols M, S, 1, and 3 are actually tattooed on his fingers. I think they're just labelling where the M goes, what is representative of the M, what is representative of the S, what is representative of the 1 and 3. But Trump may have, I said last week, may have been so confused by that photo because he's not super au fait with Photoshop that he may have misunderstood the photo and thought it was the real thing. The MS13 were actually written on his knuckles. That was what we said last week. As you can see clearly, the more you blow it up, the more obvious it is that they are not written on his knuckles. Now, the first thing was, last week when we talked about this, I said, look, I mean, that's better than a Michael Jordan tattoo being indicative. But I didn't think it was super convincing, those tattoos. Go, look, I'm not a gang expert. But the skull being 3, like it just, you just go, this feels like a stretch.
It
right?
really does feel like a stretch.
Yeah. Hello, this is Chaz from the future, and I'm jumping in here because it's better to not broadcast something that's bullshit than to broadcast bullshit and then correct it. And in this case, I told Dave right now that I'd been looking for any mentions of this marijuana, smiley face, cross skull tattoo concept before Abrego Garcia became a source of controversy. And I told him I thought I'd found a few examples, actually. And I did think I'd found a few examples. I was sure of it. And I must have been having some kind of fever dream, because then when I went back to find them later on to show you guys, because I like to provide evidence, I couldn't find any of them. And I looked hard. I looked for a half hour in here, and then I went home and looked for another 90 minutes. And I found 0 except for bullshit from Grok, which was just regurgitating what people on Twitter had already said. So it was just a circle of bullshit, essentially. And if you're looking that hard on the internet to find some trace of a theory, that's, I think, at least some evidence that if you can't find anything, the theory probably didn't exist until just now. So I wanted you guys to know that. I don't know what those tattoos mean. Maybe there's a reason Abrego Garcia's wife is trying to hide those tattoos. Maybe there isn't a reason. Maybe there is a reason and it has nothing to do with MS-13. I have no idea. Either way, this is why you have courts. Let me say it again. This is why you have courts. Now, on with the pod.
The New York Times has done a lot of interviews with gang experts this week, asking them.
Yeah.
And all of them say the most common tattoos that MS-13 members actually say
Is
MS-13.
MS-13,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah,
And
yeah.
devil's horns is apparently the other big thing. This was also mentioned in when the Department of Justice and there's another department, both of them were going after, during the Biden presidency, both of them were going after El Salvador for the deals that El Salvador, this is Bukele, was cutting with MS-13 gang members in order to reduce homicides in El Salvador, which is relevant now because Bukele is demanding MS-13 leaders who are about to face trial in the US come back to El Salvador so they can be questioned by his security forces, which a lot of people suspect the real reason is they don't want these MS-13 members talking in court about the privileges that they got from his government.
Yeah.
But even those reports talked about the kinds of tattoos that MS-13 gang members had. None of them mentioned marijuana, smiley face, cross,
Well, like
skull.
I said, I'm not saying that this is far from proof.
Yes.
I'm just adding up circumstantial evidence. The other thing is his wife put up a GoFundMe and had very strangely positioned hearts directly over the tattoos.
This is such a stretch, Chaz.
Is that you can disagree with me? That's okay.
Yeah, I do.
That's okay.
I do disagree with you.
It seems to me like to me the thing which I'm most convinced by.
Yeah.
Like I said, the tattoos I find the least convincing. The thing I'm most convinced by is the human trafficking thing. You just go, my God, that's sus. That is really sus. He's driving from Texas to Maryland with 8 people with no luggage. He says it's for some construction job. The car he's driving is owned and used by a human trafficker for human trafficking. That seems quite coincidental.
I think that the world is full of very complex circumstances that we don't understand when we only get what the New York Post chooses to tell us about them.
That is a fair point.
Yes.
Which is the reason why you have due process.
Yes.
Which, once again, is what I think should happen.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Let's make his point. Then let's laugh at Trump.
Okay.
Whatever you think, whether you agree with Dave or you agree with me, the truth is it doesn't change anything. From the beginning, from the very, I don't think you've been here when I've talked about this stuff ever, actually. But from the beginning, I've been open to the fact he could be a gang member. From the beginning, I've maintained his withholding order should be removed because it was irrelevant a long time ago.
Yes.
But you need to go through a proper legal process to do that. So my view of what needs to be done and how the administration has failed, it hasn't changed. You either believe in the rule of law or you don't believe in the rule of law. Whether they're innocent or guilty is irrelevant.
Yes.
Do you believe in the rule of law? Then follow the rule of law.
Exactly.
And I'm not the only one who thinks this. I'll tell you someone else who thinks this. The administration thinks this as well. At least they did. Because according to The Atlantic, I'll quote the Atlantic here. In the days after the administration first discovered its mistake, instead of trying to foreclose Abrego Garcia's return, officials looked for ways to bring him home. They puzzled over the fragmentary evidence tying him to gang membership, and they worried about his safety in a prison where he could be targeted for attack. A lawsuit filed by Abrego Garcia's family sparked urgent conversations amongst attorneys at the Department of State, Justice, and Homeland Security who were involved in formulating the government's response. Their discussion, which has not been previously reported, reflected serious concerns at odds with the administration's latest statements, according to 2 people familiar with the conversations, as well as notes and memos that I reviewed, says the writer. Both people spoke with me on condition of anonymity, so he's talking to the actual people here, to discuss a sensitive matter of ongoing litigation. These conversations show US officials initially sought to resolve Abrego Garcia's case quietly and ensure his safety through the conventional diplomatic channels they've used in other cases involving the mistaken deportation. Like I said, this happened before, and they brought the guy back when this happened before. Goes on. But as criticism of the administration over its mishandling of the case spread, White House officials took over the response and began striking a far more strident tone in their public statements. So originally the pros and the bureaucracy wanted to follow the conventional path.
Yes.
Until the political guys got a hold of this. And I'm guessing the political guys' initials are S and M, if you want to make a tattoo out of that. And the result of all this controversy was not just a huge mess, but also Abrego Garcia's wife ended up being doxxed by her own domestic violence complaint last week, because when the administration released it online, they never redacted her home address. So now she's had to move to a safe house, which is totally shit. Any thoughts on any of this?
No, look, I completely agree with you, and I don't want anyone to think that by emphasising the fact that I don't think that he's an MS-13 member, that I would think he should be treated any differently if he was. Yeah.
Okay. Now to the intriguing aside, which I very much want to introduce you to all, and I don't know if you've seen the clip or not, Dave. I hope if you haven't, you're about to enjoy it. I showed you that photo there about Abrego Garcia's knuckles, right? I made the point that last week I said the guy who did the Photoshop, whoever it is, wasn't trying to fool people. No one is that bad at Photoshop, okay? They were just trying to label what they felt the code of the tattoos were. But Trump might have been confused, I said. Well, this week we were left in no doubt at all.
Okay.
This is during an interview with ABC's.
Oh, I've heard about this.
I
haven't seen it.
I
though.
can't wait for you to watch this.
Okay, yes.
This was an interview with ABC's Terry Moran.
He wasn't a member of a gang. And then they looked, and on his knuckles, he had MS-13.
There's a dispute
Well,
over that.
Wait a minute. He had MS-13 on his knuckles tattooed.
Oh, he had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Hey, Terry.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
That was Photoshopped. So let me
That was Photoshop. Terry, you can't do that. Hey, they're giving you the big break of a lifetime. You know, you're doing the interview. I picked you because, frankly, I never heard of you, but that's okay. I picked you, Terry. But you're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
We'll agree to disagree. I want to move on to something else.
Terry, do you want me to show you the picture?
I saw the picture. We'll
and you think it
agree
was
to disagree.
Photoshop? Well,
Here we go.
Don't Photoshop it. Go look at his hand. He had MS-13.
He did have tattoos that can be interpreted that way. I'm not an expert on them. I want to turn to Ukraine, sir.
Terry,
I want to get to Ukraine.
No. He had MS as clear as you can be, not interpreted. This is why people no longer believe the news, because
when
it's
he was
fake
photographed
news.
in El Salvador, they aren't there. But let's just go on. They aren't there when he's in El Salvador.
They weren't
Take a look
there,
at the
but
photograph.
they're there now, right?
No,
but they're there
in
now.
your picture.
Terry.
Ukraine, sir.
He's got MS-13 on his knuckles.
All right.
Okay?
Well, we'll take a look at that.
You do such a disservice.
We'll take a look at
Why
that,
don't you
sir.
just say, yes, he does, and, go on to something else?
It's contested.
That is amazing
Yes.
footage.
Why can't you just say, yeah? Because that's what he gets from his whole inner circle.
Yeah.
That's what he gets from the only people that he actually limits himself talking to is, yes, there might be one or two sentences of resistance before they quickly realise, oh, yes, sir. Yes, it's true. He had MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles. Yes.
And the amazing thing is, Moran is desperately trying to not make it a thing.
Yes.
But Trump is insisting on making it a thing because he's angry. He's so confident in his interpretations. Like this is actually this is going to sound like I'm joking, but I'm not. I think that is a actually really valuable historical document.
Totally.
We just saw there. And,
yes.
Because to me, this reminds me of remember with Joe Biden, right? Like how there was this clip after clip of Joe Biden. Is he senile? Is he not senile? And conservatives swore that each clip was proof that Joe Biden was senile. And I was always like, is it actual proof? Maybe he's having a bad day. Maybe it's out of context. Maybe it's the wrong angle. It's hard to be 100% sure.
We spent a lot of time talking about this last year.
Totally. And in hindsight, those conservatives now claiming vindication, saying that we were in denial, they said. But, I always thought Biden wasn't fit to run for re-election. I just didn't think those clips necessarily proved anything.
Yes.
Right? It was same with Trump. There's been this debate raging for the last few months about how much of a moron he is. Not senile, but a moron.
Yeah.
And my view is he clearly has real street cunning in terms of assessing people's personalities. That's something Trump is good at. Sussing out people, knowing how to play them. I think he's really good at that. But when it comes to academia, he could be a complete moron. When it comes to policy, when it comes to understanding the way the world works, all that kind of shit, just like academic type things, right? But I've never seen perfect proof before. You see, there's clips that make him look like a moron, but they're like Biden senile clips. You go, is he trying to gaslight us? Is he appealing to morons? Is he joking? Is he trolling us? Is he just pretending to be an idiot to appeal to his base? You can't see inside the guy's head. It's like Biden again, You can never be 100% sure. Now, you can be 100% sure. That clip there, I don't think there is any way that anyone can interpret that clip as anything other than he has been 100% honest, and he genuinely, truly believes that those symbols are tattooed on Abrego Garcia's hand.
Yeah.
And that is moronic.
Yeah.
It is. There's no way around it. And so I think that is valuable footage.
Big department store of Trump's mind. Some of the shelves are already empty.
And I'll take it slightly. That's very good. I'll take it slightly further. once again, Biden parallel. How many times do we hear about, is Biden really in charge? Or is there someone else, whoever it may be? No one could ever come up with a name. Someone else.
Yeah.
Okay. Is Trump really in charge? That might sound ridiculous because he's so assertive and he's so sure of his views about things. But is he getting all his information from Stephen Miller?
Yeah.
Because it appears like he is. Like I turned my attention back to that Bukele Oval Office meeting.
Yes, yeah.
When he turns to Stephen Miller and goes, we won the Supreme Court case, didn't we? And he's, yep, 9-0. The Supreme Court completely agreed with us. And he's carried on, like you just go, I think Steve Miller is his information source.
Yes.
And I could totally see Steve Miller going, it's
which is a remarkable achievement because Steve Miller could never, ever get elected to anything.
Yes.
Totally. He must be one of those unelectable people that you can imagine.
Yeah. I mean, what do you reckon?
Stephen Miller is the most powerful person in the Trump administration.
Yeah, so you think it's likely as well?
Yeah. I absolutely believe that because he is closest to Trump on the immigration issue, which is the one that is just so central to to Trump's identity. But we saw even with Signalgate, Miller's the one who steps in, as you said, and says, "Look, stop having this argument. It's got Trump's blessing. Well, not just it's got Trump's blessing. Trump wants this to happen. Yeah. So certainly the way that he's positioned himself, not only as the person who is always the last person to whisper in Trump's ear, but then as the person that clearly the entire cabinet trusts to be conveying, Trump's views on things. Like, he's got to be the most powerful person in the Trump administration.
And if that's the case, and this is a big if, but if that's the case, then think about all of Trump's incredibly aggressive positions on immigration issues, especially in the Abrego, Garcia, El Salvador space, which just reeks of Steve Miller. Think back to what we were talking about the polling. Steve Miller might be single-handedly destroying his presidency.
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting.
Yeah.
One more thing in this space before we move on, one little mini topic, and then I'll move on to Canada. We'll move on to Canada. It's all very well to talk about the rule of law and say Abrego Garcia deserves due process.
Yes.
What does due process mean, though? This is going to be a question for the Supreme Court very soon, I suspect.
Yeah.
Because the ACLU presented in their trial against the government in front of Judge Boasberg last week, they found what the government describes due notice as. You remember the Supreme Court said that they had to provide due notice?
Yes, yeah.
Before deporting people to El Salvador?
Yep.
The government has been considering due notice to be 12 hours to indicate whether the prisoner plans to file habeas petitions, and then they give them another 24 hours to do so. They are granted one phone call during that period if they ask for it. These are people who haven't had the chance to consult a lawyer, mind you.
Yes.
And they may not speak English, and they're handed a piece of paper in English.
Yeah.
And then they get 12 hours to make up their mind, 24 hours to do something legally after that. And if they ask for it, one phone call.
Yeah.
They might not be told that they have that phone call.
No.
Yes. And after that, they're liable to be deported to an El Salvador prison, as far as the government's concerned.
Yeah.
The ACLU is asking for a reasonable opportunity of no less than 30 days to challenge their designation, detention, and removal under the Alien Enemies Act. You might be listening to that and feel that that's a bit excessive. You might go, geez, 30 days, that's a lot. You know where that number comes from? That's exactly the time alien enemies were given to challenge their detention and removal during World War II.
Yep.
The Nazis got 30 days.
Yes.
It's the government also gave those individuals, this is the Nazis I'm talking about, an opportunity to voluntarily leave the United States during that 30-day period. They weren't like trapped in a zone where they had no choice but to be sent to an El Salvador prison if they didn't win, like these guys are, even though these guys haven't been proven of doing anything. That's what the ACLU is asking for.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, District Court Judge Charlotte Sweeney of the US District Court, in a completely different case, has had her own go at defining due process in DBU versus Trump. She held Trump administration shall provide a 21-day notice to individuals detained pursuant to the Alien Enemies Act, and such notice must state the government intends to remove individuals pursuant to the Act and must also provide notice of a right to seek judicial review and inform individuals they may consult an attorney regarding their detainment and the government's intent to remove them. And the judge ordered such notice must be written in a language the individual understands. So that's another standard. This will obviously all get appealed up to the Supreme Court. Michael Klarman, a Harvard law professor who was contacted by the New York Times about this very topic, says that the Supreme Court has already kind of defined this process. He says in the 1970 Goldberg versus Kelly case, they decided that before revoking a person's welfare benefits, the government must provide notice of the reason and a hearing where the person could present evidence and contest the termination. Just give them a hearing. They don't even have to ask for the hearing. They're provided with a hearing. And remember, that case was just about the termination of welfare benefits, not being sent to a gulag. He also said notice must be made in their language, and he also noted that you may need more than a single phone call to secure a lawyer. You need enough time to actually engage the lawyer and have them examine the case and prepare a legal challenge, which could be days, if not weeks.
Yeah.
So we'll see what the Supreme Court has to say. What do you have to say?
I agree with the ACLU.
Yep.
Yeah. And, I mean, J.D. Vance, once again, has been incredibly disingenuous about the due process issue, saying that due process means every illegal immigrant in the country gets a jury trial. Like, no, that's not what it means. There are immigration courts that deal with this. It would mean that they get what they're entitled to before immigration courts. Yeah. And, I think that what the ACLU is asking for is completely reasonable.
I agree. And I think, when I said before, you might think 30 days is excessive. I can just imagine Steve Miller saying that. This whole administration has just been rushing everything.
Yes. Yeah.
30 days is not long for a legal process.
No.
It's not long at all. If you're Steve Miller watching this, you might say something like this.
And now they have the temerity to say that every single invader that Joe Biden let in should get their own individual judicial trial before they're deported, one at a time. Each one gets $1 million trial in front of a communist judge to decide whether or not we can send them home.
Is this insisting on $1 million trials for everyone?
No.
No.
It's a hearing.
It's a hearing.
Yes.
It's a hearing.
If I were Trump, I wouldn't actually be letting Stephen Miller on TV because Stephen Miller could be saying puppies are wonderful and people will go, ah!
He's quite stringent, isn't he?
Yeah.
He feels like he needs a monocle and a scar on one ear.
Yeah.
So one eye. A hearing is different to a trial.
Yes.
The Alien Enemies Act, by the way, only applies to a very small percentage of the 500,000 Venezuelan illegal immigrants in the country. It's not all they always say, 20 million. There aren't 20 million illegal, but even 11 million illegal immigrants.
Yes.
The Alien Enemies Act only applies to the Trendaragua gang members, at least so far.
Yeah.
If it's not being abused. Even the government doesn't suggest there's more than a few thousand Trendaragua people. MS-13 is considered to have 10,000 members in America. The court system can deal with those numbers easily.
Yeah.
And remember, if you look at the costs up to now, the entire immigration court system with their hearings has a budget of $840 million in 2024.
Yes.
It removed 271,000 people in that time.
Yes.
So if you work that out, that's $3,000 per removal, not quite $1 million. Yes, the Alien Enemies Act challenges will be on the expensive side. They ain't going to be $1 million.
No.
That's right. And the last wrinkle on due process is that the importance of due process is because these people are being sent to a prison in particular. Everyone should have due process, but the standards of due process are higher when you're sending someone to a prison.
Yes.
But there are other options. I understand Venezuela is not taking these people back with regular deportations, of course. But this week, we discovered that Rwanda has volunteered to take a small number of migrants whose country will not accept them back. A State Department cable was leaked confirming they had already run a trial, and they were very happy with the results. The cable mentioned a wish list from Rwanda in return, including policy concessions as well as a single $100,000 payment for social services, residency documents, and work permits. Rwanda agreed to accept 10 people to begin with while negotiating a general agreement to develop a durable program. And importantly, Rwanda won't be putting them in jail. They'll be letting them roam free. So while there would need to be due process for deportations in Rwanda as well, the standards would be significantly less exacting than the standards you would need to meet before sending someone to a gulag in El Salvador. So that may be the next front. We will see.
We can look forward to that.
Dave, talk to us about Canada.
Okay. So the Canadian election, the results came in on Monday night, Australian time. The Liberal Party is going to form a minority government. That will be its fourth term. Now, minority government is not an unusual outcome in Canadian elections. 6 out of the last 8 elections have resulted in minority government. The Liberal Party actually improved both its vote share and its seat share at this election. So did the Conservative Party. Actually, it improved its vote share and seat share more than the Liberal Party. Okay, so what made this election extraordinary then? Well, a number of things. Canadian journalists pointed out that one of the most truthful and accurate things that Trump has ever said was immediately after this election. He said, that guy was down 24 points, right? And then I came along and then he won. He's actually, he might have said 27 points, but it was actually, he said 25.
He said
25 points, but he's actually correct. 24 points. So, okay, an Angus Reid poll in January had the Liberal vote at 16%. The Liberals ended up with about 43.5% of the vote.
For those looking, for those watching, I've got a graph up. I think this is Leisure, so this is a different polling company. But you get the idea.
Yeah.
Big spike to the Liberals from January.
I don't think I've ever seen anything like that in any country. Now, okay, I want to put some very important caveats about this on the Canadian electoral system. So Canada is a first-past-the-post, winner-takes-all, single-member district system, which for the Australian listeners, it doesn't have preferential voting, right? So you vote for a minor party, it's not like you've got a preference going to a major party. You are actually shutting a minor party out, a major party out. What it looked like from that Angus Reid polling was that the Liberals were going to end up with fewer seats than the New Democratic Party, the NDP. That's the party to the left of the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
So they actually wouldn't have been the official opposition anymore. They would have been wiped out by the NDP, who is their coalition partner. Now, there was some speculation last year that the NDP could basically pull out of the election, pull out of the coalition and trigger an early election, which would have done that, which would have actually reduced the Liberal Party to the third party, and which would have made the NDP the official opposition. And there was some speculation they might do that because the Liberals looked completely doomed at that point anyway. This is when Justin Trudeau was still Prime Minister. But Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, said at the time, no, he was not going to consign Canada to the fate of Pierre Poilievre as Prime Minister. By the way, I'm really sorry for the way that I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of a lot of names.
Yeah,
now,
I don't know how to say it either.
There's one analysis from the Conservative side said, you know what we really did wrong was going so hard against Trudeau last year, spending so much money on throwing so many negative ads at Trudeau that they pushed him out of the office altogether. Because that was undoubtedly one of the factors that contributed to the Liberal Party winning. We'll get to the other big one in just a minute. But obviously Trudeau not being there was a major factor. He was a major drag on the Liberal Party vote. So the Conservatives might have been kind of a victim of their own success there. But obviously the other huge factor was as soon as Trump got elected, he starts referring to Canada as the 51st state, starts referring to Trudeau as governor, and that's when you see the Liberal Party vote, like the Liberal Party voting intention beginning to increase. Now, it's important not to misinterpret what was going on here. First of all, Poilievre has been around for a very, very long time in Canada. He came into Parliament at the age of 25. He was the youngest ever parliamentarian. He had his own populist brand really well established before Trump. And people didn't see him as Trump light. He sometimes got labelled as Trump light, but that's not how people saw him. But they definitely did see him as someone who would be more aligned with Trump. And he described himself as somebody who would be more aligned with Trump.
Well, their slogan was Canada first.
Yes. Yeah. The Conservatives, just in terms of their vote share and seat share, as we saw, they didn't actually suffer from the Trump factor in that respect in this election. Who really suffered was the NDP. What happened was everybody on the non-conservative side of Canadian politics said, shit, we've actually got to unite around the governing party which can win, right? Because nobody ever would have thought that the NDP could win an election, whereas the Liberals could conceivably win if everybody got behind them. So it was the Trump threat that basically united an entire half of Canadian politics into a position where the Liberals could win. That's what happened. Like the Conservative vote went down a little bit from that January. So January, it was 45%. They ended up with a bit under 42, like with 41.5%. So maybe there was a bit of a loss of a vote, which at the margins was pretty important. But the big story was the collapse of the NDP vote.
Yeah.
As a result, you had an election which I think had one of the highest major party votes in recent Canadian history, like an incredibly high major party vote on both sides. One of the things that meant was that the polling was pretty accurate. It predicted a margin of 3.4%. It ended up being 2.7%. But the Trump factor in this was very, very real.
Absolutely.
And Conservatives complained that Poilievre never adapted to the new circumstances. That, the Conservative vote didn't go down that much, but he wasn't able to sort of seize the same ground that the Liberals had seized on standing up to Trump.
I feel a bit sorry for him in this respect because I think
I don't feel sorry for him at all, but yeah.
In that I feel like it's not like the Liberal Party. There's a history here. The Liberal Party has a history of being more skeptical towards America than the Conservative Party in Canada.
Yes, yeah.
Right? So it was set up before you look at the individual characters. It's set up to favour the Liberals.
Yes,
if America goes crazy.
Yes, yeah.
Number two, when America is going crazy in a trade war scenario,
yes, yeah.
Who are you going to want? You're going to want a dude who's just a professional politician who still looks young and all the rest of it?
That was the other thing that hurt
Or
him.
do you want the dude who's been the governor of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada?
Yes.
Who has a lot of gravitas and he comes off as Mr. Technocrat, which there are times when that's a negative.
Yes.
This isn't one of those times.
Yeah.
Right now you want the direct opposite of the crazy populist. Because look at what the crazy populist is doing across the border.
Yes.
But he was tailor-made for this situation. The Liberals picked well.
Yes.
Yeah.
He really was. Poilievre, I mean, maybe he was on a hiding to nothing, but he clearly was not able to adapt to the situation. And it's not like Conservatives can't stand up to the US because Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, who was re-elected in a landslide in February, his whole brand now is standing up to the US. He's Captain Canada. He was advising Poilievre, look, you've got to do more like what I've been doing. Now, sure, that might have just been narcissism. But the Poilievre team didn't react very well to that. I just want to also touch on a few things aside from, this is actually related to the overall result. So Canada's got relatively small electorates. They're known as ridings. They're each is about half the size of an Australian parliamentary seat. But nonetheless, even though they're small electorates, there were some staggeringly close results. Okay, now bear in mind, the Liberals have ended up with 169 seats, 3 seats short of a majority. Okay, 3 seats the Conservatives flipped, right? Because Conservatives did make seat gains. Windsor, Tecumseh, Lakeshore, Conservatives won by 233 votes. Milton, East, Halton Hills, South, Conservatives won by 298 votes. Kitchener Centre, Conservatives won by 358 votes. That's fewer than 1,000 votes that could have turned the election into a Liberal majority. But before you go pitying the Liberals, bear in mind, a couple of seats that they won. Terrebonne, sorry for the pronunciation, Liberals won by 35 votes.
Oh.
And in Newfoundland, Terra Nova, the Peninsulas, Liberals won by 12 votes.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've never seen election results like that anywhere before. Now, I'm sure that those are going to be subject to recounts.
Yeah, they might be.
But yeah, that is that's pretty remarkable. I would think. I was just watching the results live and thinking, oh, those margins have to change at some point, don't they? They have to go normal at some point. But no, they didn't. Okay, so coming back to poor misguided Poilievre. He lost his own seat.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even that close in the end. He lost it by 4%. Because even though he's from Calgary and he presents himself as a prairie populist, he occupies a riding in the suburbs of Ottawa and promises to have mass sackings of public servants are not that popular in the federal capital of Canada.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? They also didn't like the memory of him supporting the trucking convoy that occupied central Ottawa for weeks. People were not very fond of that. So anyway, he's lost his seat. He said he's going to stay on as opposition leader. Going to be a bit hard for him to do it without a seat. And the earliest he could get back into the parliament would be sometime later on this year.
Well, Carney was
going to be an uphill battle. I mean, if
Carney was the leader of the Liberal Party without a seat.
That's true, he was.
It can be done.
No, there's nothing legally to stop it. But in order to occupy the leader of the opposition's house, he has to be in Parliament. Yeah, so he's going to lose his home. First victim of the trade war. First person made homeless by the trade war.
I was going to say one thing which hasn't. I was trying to read a little bit about the Canadian election, even though it's not really my thing. But I did notice that a few articles mentioned, which it hasn't gotten much publicity, is that maybe a bit of a factor as well was that when he came in, Carney got rid of the carbon tax.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a definite factor.
Which, a bit of deja vu for Australians there, if you care about that kind of thing like I do.
No, he basically jettisoned as much of the Trudeau baggage as he could as soon as he got in. Another factor is also there was a collapse of the Bloc Québécois vote as well. So the Bloc Québécois and the NDP both ended up on 6.3% of the popular vote. When that Angus Reid poll was taken in January, so the NDP was sitting on 21% of that vote. And it's not, I mean, the collapse of the Bloc Québécois vote, there are people who are attributing that to that's the declining power of Quebec separatism, especially in the face of the kind of threat that Trump faces. The decline of the NDP vote, though, that is far more just about strategic voting. Yeah. So a bit sad for them. Jagmeet Singh also lost his seat. One of the Green co-leaders failed to get elected as well. It was a big night for leaders not winning seats. Yeah.
Sucks to be them.
Sucks to be them.
The other thing I'd say, which is probably worth taking away from us a little bit, is that both parties flirted with protectionism and interventionism in the election campaign. I mean, Carney more than Poilievre. So that's a double move away from America. It's not just a move away from America, just bugger off America, but also bugger off the system that you're trying to put in place.
Yeah. Well, something else that I read about but know nothing about, so if we've got any Canadian peppers, maybe they can enlighten us, is that one of the first things people started talking about in the face of the US trade threat was that there are actually barriers between provinces that should be brought down. Apparently, as I said, I don't know anything about that, but that was one thing that people immediately started talking about. I just don't think that we can overstate how much of a shock to the system it was to have just this utter hostility coming from the US. And listening to the things that Mark Carney has been saying, basically the relationship is dead and we can never go back.
Well, yeah, this is his election night speech. It's
Yes.
actually quite sad, to be honest.
Yeah.
We are once again at one of those hinge moments of history. Our old relationship with the United States, a relationship based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The system of open global trade, anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for a country for decades, is over. These are tragedies, but it's also our new reality. We are over the shock of the American betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons.
But you're going to take us forward.
We have to look out for ourselves. And above all, we have to take care of each other.
It's sad. That makes me sad.
I mean, one of the biggest things that Trump has accomplished in the first 100 days is making allies seriously rethink their commitments to the United States or the US commitments to them.
I can't believe on election day he tweeted out what he tweeted out. That thing about the good luck to the great people of Canada. Elect a man who has the strength and wisdom to cut your taxes in half, increase your military power for free to the highest level in the world, have your car, steel, aluminium, lumber, energy, and all other businesses quadruple in size with zero tariffs or taxes. If Canada becomes a cherished 51st state of the United States of America, no more artificially drawn line from many years ago. Look how beautiful this landmass would be. Free access with no border. All positives with no negatives. It was meant to be. America can no longer subsidize Canada with the hundreds of billions of dollars a year that we have been spending in the past. It makes no sense unless Canada is a state. Why would you tweet that out on election day? Like they can vote for you.
I love it. No border. Borders are artificially drawn lines.
I know.
He's correct. I mean, sure, that statement is very disrespectful to the victims of the Great Pig War, but nonetheless, he's right. I mean, he's not right about wanting to annex Canada, but he's completely right about the artificiality of borders.
Yeah, I think that's a one-time only policy for Trump.
I think it might be. And then after the election, because
I didn't know this.
Talk about how pissed off would Poilievre be. So even though Trump had this moment of self-realization, like, oh yeah, I caused a 24% swing in the Canadian election, he then claimed that, oh no, it was between two guys who hate Trump and the one who hates Trump less won.
Carney.
So, yeah. He's now, Poilievre, he's lost his seat, he's lost his home, and now he's got Trump claiming he lost the election because he was more anti-Trump than Mark Carney.
I don't think that's why he lost the election.
I
do think it's true that Poilievre hates Trump more than Carney.
Oh, I'm sure he does now, yeah. Yeah, no, Carney's going to be kissing Trump's photo before he goes to bed every night. No, but Poilievre has every reason to be pissed off.
Yeah.
Look, I think that Carney's in for a very difficult ride as Prime Minister. I mean, his best outcome would be he manages to resolve the trade war very, very quickly and in Canada's favour. But then once he does that, I suspect that the basis of his party's support is going to collapse again.
Yeah. Fourth term parties aren't long for this world.
That's right, yeah. Yeah. Fourth term surprise winners don't have a great record. But when Carney stops being Prime Minister, for whatever reason, they need to use Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds song "The Carney."
Okay.
Do you know that one?
I don't know that one.
Nobody saw the Carney go. Yeah, it's about a carney who deserts a circus and they bury his horse.
After this, I'm going to go and listen to that. Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
And you can all do that as well. I'll put in the homework.
It's a slow starter. I warn you. It's got an even slower start than the Village People's Liberation.
Clip.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. Look, to be fair, It's not very good.
No.
Yeah, not next best.
But it's probably the best song involving the word carny.
The word carny, yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Dave.
Absolutely. Best song about carnies since Gypsies, Tramps and Thieves.
Sure. Dave, you got to get out of here.
I do have to go. Sorry, Peppers.
That's all right.
I will see you next week.
Thank you so much, Dave. We will see
My
you
pleasure.
next week.
Okay.
Until then, stay peppy.
Stay peppy.
See you guys after the White Flash. Hello, welcome to the other side of the White Flash. I am here the day after what you just watched or listened to with Lockie. Hello, Lockie.
Hello, Chaz.
I promised all kinds of stuff. I'm going to break all those promises because I realized we've got so much extra content. I really over-prepared for the last podcast that I should just do another podcast. So rather than doing a 12-hour podcast now, I've contacted Elle Hardy. We are going to do a podcast on Tuesday. So you'll be getting that on Tuesday. We'll be doing it very early Tuesday. You'll get it on Tuesday afternoon or night. And we will cover a whole bunch of stuff which I couldn't fit into the last podcast. Probably some extra news as well.
And Elle is a much better person to talk to about it than I am. So thank you, Elle, for saving my bacon.
Yes. But for now, I'm just going to be doing a bit of correspondence. I just want to get you into the mood with a toilet break to begin, though. I saw a great clip. I loved it. And I just want to share it with you guys because I know that this pod is a little hive of Poot Buttigieg lovers. Every time we bring up Poot Buttigieg, we get lots of correspondence. People going, why? Why can't he be president? Why, Chaz? Why? Look, I like the guy too. I like him as well. Do you like Poot Buttigieg?
I thought it was Pete.
Why do I keep on calling him Poot?
Oh, okay.
No,
Cool.
did I call him Poot? Why am I calling him?
I don't know why you're calling him Poot.
I don't mean to call him Poot. We got Pete Buttigieg lovers, and I'm calling him Poot. Do you like Pete Buttigieg?
Much more than I like Poot, yes.
Yeah, I think Poot's okay as well. Yeah, he's the unfortunate brother. Look, obviously he's a great communicator. He knows how to reach out to people. He can reach people where they are in a way that many Democrats can't. That is all true. I agree with all of that. And I think this clip I'm about to play you does as good a job as any to show this, which is why I'm going to play it to you because I know you'll love it. The fact that this occurred on a bro podcast makes it even rarer and more welcome. So Pete Buttigieg.
Poot Buttigieg.
Pete Buttigieg was speaking here about reaching out to non-Democrats. Let's go.
And as right as I believe we are about the big things, even though I'm open to the fact that we may not be right about everything, we're not telling people that they are bigoted or racist or whatever because they don't already start out in the same place that we are. Right? There has to be that process of kind of inviting people to look at things the way we look at things versus commanding them to. And I think that is something that in the culture of my party has been especially challenging in the last 10 or 20 years. But that we need to work through because, again, politics is about persuasion. It's about finding people where they are. It's about how they feel about themselves. I think there is a desire for belonging that is not just something liberals care about. I actually think the loss of belonging that happens in a town like where I grew up when you lose your auto job and the Workforce Development Agency comes along and says, good news, I found a job that you can get qualified for based on your education and it pays just as much and you're going to be a nursing assistant.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a perfectly good job, obviously, but if the last 20 years of your life have been about not just the way you make your money, but the way you see where you fit in the world is about what you know how to do in a machine shop. And some well-intentioned person with a clipboard is telling you, guess what, now you get to be a nursing assistant.
Yeah.
That is not finding people where they are. That's not because something has happened to their sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And, we really care about belonging, maybe to a fault, but we try to make sure that there's room for everybody at the table in society and in different processes and in our politics. But if we really take that seriously, if we really live up to that, that means recognizing that some crises around belonging are a big part of why some people, many of whom voted for the other guy this last time, are really prepared to just burn the house down and think that's no worse than any of the other things that could happen.
So that was excellent. I've never heard someone make that point about belonging before. It's a great point. As soon as he said it, I thought, shit, he's right. He should be president. Why not? Why not? Now,
That's
look,
the power of poot.
that is the power of the pooty tang. The whole podcast was really interesting. If a little frustrating at times, if I'm being honest. That podcast, by the way, if you want to watch it, it is. We probably should put it in the homework if between us, if we remember. But if you look for it yourself, it's Andrew Schultz's podcast called Flagrant. So if you look up Flagrant, Pete Buttigieg on YouTube, you'll find it there. And to be clear, Andrew Schultz is no right winger. Okay, people treat him like he's a right winger because he's a podcaster, but the guy is a Jewish dude who grew up in New York and has spent most of his life wishing he was black, clearly. Right? So what are the chances that guy is a right winger? Like, they're not high. What he is, though, is keen to succeed in the podcast world. That he is. And, yeah, we all know the podcast world is kind of right-coded in America. Yeah, kind of. And so he does his best to appeal to his audience. That's why he's successful, I guess. And Pete Buttigieg was excellent on this podcast. Regardless, I don't care what his partisanship is. Andrew Schultz, Pete Buttigieg was fantastic. So, okay, so what? Let's address it again. Why can't Buttigieg be a successful nominee? I keep on getting asked. Well, look, maybe he can. It's not like there's someone who's obviously going to be the nominee that there has been in the past. But I'd say three things. One, his best chance, unless he can get himself another job soon, either senator or governor, his best chance was 2020 because he was new, he was fresh. There were literally no viable options in the 2020 race that the Democratic Party would accept. I mean, Bernie Sanders was totally viable, but they were never going to accept him, right? Which is obviously what happened when it looked like it was between Bernie and someone else. Everyone else just got together and teamed up against Bernie because they thought, we cannot have Bernie. We are not going to accept Bernie Sanders. So if you rule him out because the Democratic Party were not going to accept him, Elizabeth Warren probably similarly, the Democratic Party probably weren't going to accept. Not that she turned out to be a successful candidate anyway. There just were no other alternatives. And Pete Buttigieg was there. He had a great first couple of primaries. He won a primary. Like he was there. He had a great start, and yet people just said, nah, even though there was no one else. And that's how they ended up with Joe Biden, because no one liked Joe Biden. He started off terribly because no one wanted Joe Biden, but they chose him because they thought there is literally no one else. So that was Pete Buttigieg's best shot, in my view. By contrast, you look at 2028, he's not going to be up against no one. He's going to be up against a whole bunch of quite successful, ranging up to very successful governors. Like there is going to be Whitmer, Newsom, Shapiro, and Wes Moore. At the very least, those four are there. There may also be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes.
Not to mention a bunch of others. Like there may be Jared Polis. I doubt it. But there may be a bunch of other people all of whom would have been more likely to win than anyone else in the field in 2020. He's going to be up against a stacked field, Pete Buttigieg, in 2020. So it's not going to be easy. And what's changed since then for Pete Buttigieg? If he doesn't become a senator or a governor, how is he different? Why is he more qualified? Because he was transportation secretary? Really? That's not going to be a qualification for anyone. So he's no better off, but the people he's up against are going to be much better. So it's a tough situation for him.
Uphill battle.
It is an uphill battle, I think. But also, there's a reason why we all like him. I say we, I mean me and many peppers. We value a certain kind of cool rationality, which he exudes. This is why I make this pod. This is why you like this pod, because we happen to all have similar tastes. I have come to. I'm sorry to bring this to you and put it to you this way, because a lot of you may not be aware of this. It may never have occurred to you until now. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I've long come to accept that I am usually the exception in my tastes and desires. I'm not the rule. And maybe many of you have to come to that acceptance as well, because you all like PEP. We are not the rule at PEP. We are very far from the rule. Hey, I hope I'm wrong, but in this case, I'm usually not when it comes to me being the exception. So when you like the same person I like, that's a bad sign. That's a real bad sign. But, you know, we'll see. There's a lot of great things about Buttigieg. I hope I'm wrong. Any thoughts there?
Oh, just at how wonderful it is to use the insult. Well, I know that Chaz Licciardello is a fan of you.
Anyway, on with it. Wonderful. Okay, so I'll just try to churn out quick 40 minutes, end up about 3.5 hours.
Easy.
Laughing. Okay, and then we'll say, so not a long one, and we'll save your time for the L podcast.
We'll have all this out before the snags are even on the Barbie.
Beautiful. Abrego Garcia correspondence from Theo. The Garcia story you mentioned from the DV record that it appears his wife implied she may have been a little quick to pull the trigger on the report. He's referring to last week. I did the domestic violence complaint from Abrego Garcia's wife, and I said, that's what she said. She said she'd been a little bit quick to pull the trigger, so she didn't follow up on it. Look, I'm really glad that he could help. It sounded like counselling might have helped him manage his anger. But look at the report. He ripped her shirt and shorts off her. Now, shorts don't rip easily. Shirts easier. He punched her. He scratched her, drawing blood. Their baby was present and distressed. Add to this that there were multiple events, as she has multiple photos and videos showing how violent he can be. I'd suggest that was pretty dangerous. And the ripped shorts aren't really consistent with domestic violence, and give me a slight hint there was a risk of this turning to sexual assault. I don't know about that. That's what Theo's saying. But anyway, if anything, she has shown pretty remarkable grace to him in holding off pulling the trigger on the report. Now, as you correctly, in my view, stated, this isn't relevant to the story of his due process. However, your comment that she might have been hasty in pulling the trigger might impact negatively on a Pepper listening who is experiencing abuse. It might warrant a little bit of a rethink. Hope you take the comment in the spirit it's intended, not as pedantry, but just to be careful about minimising DV and suggesting women are hasty in reporting that level of event. I reckon it definitely was worth a report. Fair call, Theo. I totally take your comment in a constructive way, like you meant it. That's why I'm reading it out. Otherwise, I would have ignored it. As you say, I was simply passing on what the wife has said. That was not my value judgment. I'm just saying that's what the wife had said. But you are also right that we should note that while she is very free to make whatever call she wants to make, what I read out was more than enough to justify a domestic violence report. Absolutely. Good call. Well worth making. Thank you, Theo. That's why I read it out.
Nice job, Theo.
Yep. Moving on. This is not actually correspondence, just while we're talking about Abrego Garcia. You might recall I inserted a Chaz from the Future edit into the middle of the podcast because I'd somehow thought I'd found something I hadn't found. Honestly, I must be dreaming this shit.
Just need sleep, man.
How screwed up am I that I'm dreaming about Abrego Garcia politics? Anyway.
I don't know you write scripts in your sleep. This isn't too different.
I interrupted the point Dave was making with the edit. And I just want to clarify it because it's a really important point. It was a great point from him. I want to back over it and add a little bit more because it's a point that hasn't been made enough. It was about Bukele and El Salvador. There are huge question marks about exactly what Bukele is playing at with this deal. Because apparently at first, Bukele wasn't keen on taking people who weren't necessarily criminals. Because, the main way he says, he knows most of these people aren't criminals. And he didn't want to do it because he thought somewhere down the track, I might pay a price for that. And he's right. He may pay a price for that somewhere down the track. But he did it anyway. And he did it in return for Trump handing over a very short list of high-ranking MS-13 members that are in American custody. He wanted them back in his custody. Why? Well, according to a US Treasury Department report back in 2021, Bukele paid off MS-13 gang members to keep crime low. This was before he went down on the super crackdown path. He only did that a few years into his reign. Originally, he apparently tried to buy them off in order to keep crime low. And including in his own prisons. He gave them special privileges in prisons, like access to sex workers in prisons and mobile phones in prisons and cash. And some of these people he paid off ended up in America and in American jails. This included Cesar Humberto Lopez Larios, who was arrested in June in America and is currently awaiting trial. He was awaiting trial on several terrorism charges. Now, America does not like to give up terrorists. But according to an expert in El Salvador who was talking to the New York Times about this, what Bukele is desperate for is to get these guys back in El Salvador before they can talk in a US court, because all the US prosecutors know about this as well. And he doesn't want them on the record. And he's already gotten this guy, this terrorism guy, they've already handed them over, and he wants a few more. So if the El Salvador thing isn't bad enough, this might all be about helping Bukele cover up his own corruption. That's what this might be about. And that makes it even worse. It just gets worse and worse. So Dave didn't really nail the point. He just sort of alluded to it and moved on. So I just want to back over it, just so you guys fully understand that.
Wow.
Back to the correspondence. More deportations correspondence from Nathan. On the topic of deportations with immigration trials, I heard it stated that this was done to a large extent under Obama as well, with reference to this ACLU article, which I'm going to put in the homework. You can read it for yourself. I'm going to call it Nathan's article in the homework. He asks, is this a fair comparison, or is there a significant difference between that and what is happening now? Brilliant question, Nathan. Brilliant question to look into it, to ask those questions about if there's a hypocrisy here, and to not just assume there is a hypocrisy. Think, okay, this is interesting. Let's explore this and retain some doubt either way until you know. That's great, Nathan. Thank you very much for that. Well, firstly, let's read a bit from the article so everyone knows what we're talking about. In 1995, 1,400 immigrants were subject... this is written in 2014. In 1995, 1,400 immigrants were subject to non-judicial removals, representing 3% of total deportations. By fiscal year 2012, that number had sharply increased to 313,000 non-judicial removals, an all-time high. Under today's removal system, only 1/4 of all people facing expulsion get to present their case before an immigration judge. These judges employed by the Justice Department are experts in immigration law. They conduct formal court hearings where they hear live witnesses, review documentary evidence, and evaluate applications for immigration relief. By contrast, non-judicial removals are fast-track proceedings wholly controlled by the Department of Homeland Security, sometimes involving only a single border agent who acts as both judge and jury. Those facing non-judicial removal have no lawyer and no chance to appeal. So that's the nut graph from that article. So is that the same thing as is happening now? Was Obama the person who actually went hard on this? Well, today it's got a different name. That name is expedited removal. And Nathan, I'm afraid to tell you, it is so much more common today than it was even when that article was written. It's basically what anyone who turns up at the border gets unless they have proper entry documents. Okay, so unless you have specifically been organised to be at the border, in Biden's case, there were apps and all that kind of stuff, you get expedited removal. And in Trump's case, there are no proper documents. Like, you just can't get them. So anyone who turns up at the border for Trump gets expedited removal, right? So it's 100%. It also applies now, under Trump, to anyone who gets caught inside America who is an illegal immigrant and has been in America and can't prove they've been in America for more than 2 years. Okay, not just you've been in America for more than 2 years, but you have to prove it, which is not always an easy thing to do. You can maybe prove it with a water bill or electricity bill.
I was going to say how much and what proof will be accepted is presumably has a question mark over it too.
Absolutely. Okay, so the point is, it's very hard to get anything but expedited removal now, and that expedited removal is the best case scenario for many migrants today. That is what I refer to as the rule of law scenario, because at least that's a law. Right?
Oh dear. As
opposed to what we're talking about now, where people get shipped off without being heard by anybody and they get shipped off to a gulag. The expedited removal scenario, what happens then, just so you know, so you understand what we're talking about, they get what you call a credible fear screening. It's an immigration officer, what they were bitching about in our article. An immigration officer will try to assess whether they have a credible fear of persecution in the country they are fleeing from. If the immigration officer decides they do have a credible fear of persecution, then they get more rights. They could be on their way to an immigration judge then, and an asylum court, all the rest of it. That's when they enter the system, essentially. If the immigration officer decides, sorry, you don't have a credible fear of persecution, there is no appealing, you do not see a judge, you're gone. Gee. You're out of here. It's that's how it is right now. And that's how it was for a lot of people under Biden as well. So look, it's 75% of cases. Yeah, it's going to be more than that. I don't know exactly how many, but it's going to be more than that. That's not what I'm referring to. Expedited removal is not what I'm referring to when I'm talking about a lack of due process. So no, this did not start with Obama. You might not like this, but if we're being fair, expedited removal, it's necessary. You need a quick method to process literally millions of people. You just can't do it with a full trial. You just can't. It's I'm not talking about Steve Miller style.
$1 million trials.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about even if you gave every single person a week-long trial, a 2-day long trial. When you're talking about millions of people, it's very hard. Immigration courts, they rush them through as well. They give them a couple of hours and then you're out of here. So even the full immigration court with a full immigration judge these days is not what they used to be. It's racing them through anyway. So whether it's expedited removal or whether it's an immigration court, it's not going to be what you would call substantive full due process. It's just not going to be. That sucks. But that is so much better than what I am complaining about. What I'm complaining about is shipping people off to a gulag, potentially for the rest of their life, without even receiving a hearing from anyone, from an immigration officer, from Joe Blow, from anyone. Half these people who are being shipped off might, for all we know, they were chosen by AI and then they're out of here. Like, it's just, it is, we're so far down the slippery slope, Nathan, honestly. I would love the process to be better than it is. I would support, I've told you guys these a million times, I would support putting huge amounts of money into the immigration court system and make it as fast as possible but as fair as possible. Like billions and billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars. I have no problems with that. I think this is important. Justice is important. I think you should put as much money into it and put as much time into it as you can possibly practically do while keeping the system afloat. That's what I think, right? We are so far from that, but I can accept reality that not everyone is where I'm at. I cannot accept what we are getting now, the off to the gulag without a hearing treatment. Don't blame Obama for that. It's got nothing to do with him. It's got nothing to do with expedited removal. It's a whole different world of hurt. But thank you very much, Nathan, for raising an interesting question, and I think hopefully I taught you guys something you didn't know before that. One more El Salvador-related email. This is a fun one because this has been a dire topic. From Amy. Amy draws our attention to the song by band Athlete called El Salvador. She points out at the 39-second mark, I'm telling you this so you can find this out for yourself. You can find on YouTube. The lyrics are, fly to El Salvador, I don't know why, and I don't know what for. Let's just watch that.
Fly to El Salvador, I don't know why, and I don't know what for.
Now, you might say, what's going on here with these Brit pop rockers? Why are they being so political? What's this? That's a strange topic for a song. What if I told you that song was made in 2003? As Amy says, weirdly prescient pop lyrics from 2003. That's a brilliant pickup, Amy. And if someone wants to try to make an El Salvador sting out of that, you are more than welcome. Sometimes with our stings, there isn't much reason. They're a funny idea at the time. There isn't much reason to play them again. I don't think El Salvador is going away anytime soon. So if you want to make a sting out of that, we will play it.
I mean, it sounds like we've already got a 6-second sting there.
We
if we can get permission from the band.
Athlete.
That's
what I'm saying. Like, it might need to get chopped up a little bit. And it might need to get dirtied up for it to be legal. Because I don't think Athlete would give us permission. So if you want to mess around with that a bit to make it sting-worthy, it'll get a run. Thank you very much, Amy. Let's move on. Murkowski correspondence. We spoke last week about how I was grateful that Lisa Murkowski was being honest about how scared she is by the current situation in America. Many people, I said, were giving a shit for not doing something or not doing more about it. Not that she can do that much. She's only one senator. And she is voting against Trump a lot, by the way. But anyway, Trinket gave an example.
You really were grateful.
I was. Trinket gave an example of someone who isn't impressed by Murkowski, namely Trinket. If you want to be left behind or left out because you're a MAGA, then good. Fuck off. Chaz, you are always saying there are normal conservatives left in the GOP. You're wrong. They're all MAGA and they're all brainwashed and fucked. It's ridiculous that you are still saying this. You're either being deliberately ignorant or just gaslighting at this point. Bit of a fruity correspondence there, a bit of juice
For
there.
the jugular. Nice.
And, I'm definitely not gaslighting, Trinket. I believe what I'm saying. Maybe I'm deliberately ignorant. Look, I do think there are plenty of real Republicans. I'm sorry, Trinket. I do. I read what they write. I think there are plenty of real Republicans still. I think they are weak and I think they are scared. And I don't blame them. They're politicians, Trinket. They're politicians. People don't become politicians because they like being hated. They become politicians because they want to be liked. They want people to vote for them. They want to be popular. Yeah, look, obviously politicians end up getting hated. They're deluded. But when they get in the game, I'm sure they have dreams of people cheering their name and giving big speeches and go, all that kind of stuff. Look, I'm not saying you have to respect them, Trinket, but I maintain 90% of politicians do not change. They stick their finger in the wind and they go with it. That's what makes a politician. Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter. That is what a politician is like. They go with their team. What's my team saying? That's what I'm going to do. That's what will get me elected. That's what will stop people trying to kill my family. The really genuinely principled types, they exist, but they're few and far between. They should be cherished. All respect to them. I respect them so much more than the other ones, but let's face it, they're rare. This is the case now, Trinket. It was the case 20 years ago. It was the case 50 years ago. It's going to be the case in 50 years. That's what politicians are like. If you can't live with that, then you've got a problem with democracy, I'm afraid, because that is what democracy produces. It produces politicians. What you have a problem with there, Trinket, when you have contempt for these people is not MAGA. It's people who will go with MAGA when they feel like they've got no other choice but to go with MAGA. Those people are most politicians, even Democrats. Democrats don't have that choice, though. Democrats don't have to go with MAGA. They're in the Democratic Party. But if there was a Democratic MAGA that was awful, then all those lots of those Democrats would go with that as well. That's just how politicians roll. I'm not saying they're all the same. There's no morality. Like I said, some of these people, deserve all our respect and they've got real principle and all the rest of it. But just most politicians, we know what they're like. They're snivelling cowards. They're politicians. And that's okay because they're people. Most people are snivelling cowards. Like, it's like I was saying last week about the Christians. Like, don't blame the tools that people use when they're just being people. People are imperfect. They will use all kinds of tools to be imperfect. In this case, it's politics. Daniel was a little more sympathetic. He said, I respectfully disagree where you say don't expect people to be heroes unless you would act differently. I'd never run into a burning building. I know that. So I'm not a firefighter. But if my building's burning, I don't expect other civilians to run in to save me. But I do explicitly expect the people who choose to become firefighters to save me. They volunteered to be firefighters. They chose to be heroes knowing the risks. Murkowski is one of the few people who can stop Trump. She signed up for this. Now the building's burning. She's watching from the outside going, I'm scared to run in and save anyone. Worse, she's adding fuel to the fire. I understand she's scared, but she asked for the job. Time to do it. I'm glad she spoke out. Now it's time to act. I think that's a reasonable position to take from Daniel. I think a lot of people would agree with Daniel. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. I mean, I disagree with parts of it. I don't think Murkowski can stop Trump. Far from it. And I think that she is doing damn close to the most that she could possibly do, to be honest. Like, without being drummed out of the party.
I think the sentiment is good, but all metaphors are flawed.
Yeah. Well,
sorry, no metaphor is perfect.
Yeah. I'll allow Bradley to respond on my behalf because I thought Bradley put it quite well. It's a real stretch comparing the senator for Alaska to a firefighter. She did not sign up for death threats to her and her family.
Cool.
That's not part of the job. Even if nutbags insist on making threats against senators and their families, it's a fucking office job. Bingo, Bradley, bingo. This development, which everyone's scared of, is new and it sucks. And I fervently hope that this doesn't become part of the job description for being a politician in the long term, because if it does, the people politics attracts is going to change. And those people are not just going to be craven cowards. They're going to be worse. I don't want to know what those people are going to be like. I hope we don't never see them. I hope this is just a short run thing so we can get back to the craven cowards. Next, Medicaid correspondence from Flea Chop. Work requirements for Medicaid. So, if you're unemployed, you'd therefore not be eligible for Medicaid unless you can prove that you have some kind of disability or health issue that prevents you from working, right? But how do you get that proof if you're unemployed and not eligible for free or subsidized healthcare? Especially if the issue isn't some immediately obvious physical disability, but it's psychological or neurological. It can cost a lot to get those kinds of diagnoses. That is a great point from Flea Chop. Like if you say you're an agoraphobe and you like that's just off the top of my head. I'm sure there are jobs you can get as agoraphobe, but whatever.
Proving it is going to cost money.
Yeah,
Yes.
proving it's going to cost money, and 100% right. It's a massive problem in my view, actually. People not having the resources or understanding of how they can even satisfy qualification requirements is a huge issue. They, ironically, are the exact people who need the help the most. And they're the ones who can't get it. That's why I tend to get defensive of Medicaid. Like, you guys know I've got libertarian roots. I like to save money from government. Even though I like the government to work well, I also like low taxes and not spend lots of money. So I'm always looking for savings.
Amen.
You know I'm always looking for savings. But I get quite defensive of Medicaid compared to some other forms of the welfare system because number one, I think Medicaid actually costs a lot less than other forms. Like, it costs way less than Medicare. It's much more efficient. Number one. Number two, I think Medicaid really targets the people who aren't quite right, but they haven't been officially diagnosed with anything. You know those people who just go, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you ain't never getting a job, mate. Those people. Medicaid just targets them perfectly, whereas other forms of welfare don't. Like Social Security is basically just money for old people. That's not targeting people with problems.
Right.
When they came up with Social Security, old people had problems. There was a lot of old people poverty amongst old people. Now there isn't. Now there's less poverty amongst old people than anywhere else. Yes, because of Social Security. I'm aware of that. I'm not saying let's get rid of Social Security. I'm just saying I'm much more likely to be looking for savings in Social Security than I am in Medicaid for exactly the reasons I just said. Daryl Cooper correspondence. Now that's weird because we didn't really talk about Daryl Cooper. Well, Melina gave him a drive-by. Crowfoot says, I don't have any sympathy for Daryl Cooper, whose beliefs are clearly going in a very dubious direction. Daryl Cooper he doesn't even call himself a historian. He talks about history. He's turned up on the Rogan podcast. He's talked about Nazis a lot.
Right.
But for accuracy's sake, I must correct her description of him as a Holocaust denier. He hasn't yet made any statements justifying that description. He was accused by a lot of people of Holocaust denial after comments on Tucker Carlson about mass deaths in Russia, made in a very glib and excusing way. But he was clearly, in context, referring to the mass deaths of Russian POWs, not the Holocaust. There is loads to criticise Cooper for, but to call him a Holocaust denier is going too far. I agree, Crowfoot. Since we defamed the guy, I think it's only fair that we read that out. I think it'd be more accurate to call him a Nazi apologist rather than a Holocaust denier. I hope that works for you, Crowfoot. It works for me. I brought that up not just because I wanted to write
Avoid defamation.
Yeah, I don't think he's about to sue us.
He's not a pepper, so we're saying.
That's right. He's the only one who I won't claim as a pepper.
Yeah.
But so he's been involved in an interesting area, so I just thought this was a good hook to just mention this as well. I haven't prepared this properly, but it's an interesting situation developing on Joe Rogan about him. Like I said, he's turned up on Rogan at least once, I think probably multiple times, and said his piece about Nazis, and people are going, oh, what's going on here? Why is Joe Rogan platforming this dude? And Douglas Murray came on Joe Rogan recently, about 2 weeks ago, I'd say. Douglas Murray, you may recall him as he's a conservative journalist. I think he works at The Spectator, and he turns up on Piers Morgan an awful lot. He's very conservative. He's super pro-Israel. He's been to Israel many times when he's sort of covered the wars there, and he had it out with Joe Rogan about Rogan's Gaza coverage, because Rogan gets on a bunch of comedians who are anti-Israel, or at least pro-Palestinian, and they're not very happy with what Israel's doing, right? And Douglas Murray really got in the soapbox about that, because he's like, these people don't know anything. Have you been there? Have you been there? And Dave Smith, not our Dave Smith, comedian Dave Smith. So many Dave Smiths. The comedian Dave Smith is like
another Dave Smith.
Yeah, is like, do I need to go there to see what's obvious? And Douglas Murray's like, no, it wouldn't hurt to be informed before you sound off. Like, that's his kind of vibe, right? I'm so half doing an impression, but not really. Anyway, he comes on. He has it out with comedian Dave Smith and Joe Rogan. They don't enjoy it. They then snigger behind his back afterwards. Joe Rogan and all his mates.
On a hot mic?
No, I'm not talking about like while he's there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, on air. Joe Rogan has spent the next few weeks obviously butthurt about this, talking about it to everyone. Like, just getting them to go, oh, yeah, he's a dickhead, yeah. Oh, you got to go there. You got to go there before you know what you're talking about.
Must be nice to do correspondence just with your own internal monologue.
Yes, I should try it.
Sorry.
Yeah, anyway, I don't need an internal monologue. I've got an external monologue right here. Thank you for that, Lockie. Thank you for not making me Joe Rogan. Anyway, no. Joe Rogan has a debt with guests. He does the same thing I do, except he has a different person in the chair every single time. They're all performing your role, just agreeing with him. Anyway, yeah. And he is, for the next 2 weeks, he's been going on and on and on about this and scoffing at the idea of expertise, essentially. Because that was Douglas Murray's point. His point is people who don't have expertise should just shut the fuck up every now and then. And Rogan has just been laughing about that. Anyway, it's a really interesting area for the conservative podcast world where they're kind of divided on this. They're at each other because Douglas Murray is a hero of these people.
Mm.
And he does know what he's talking about. You can disagree with him, but the guy brings information. Whenever he brings his opinions, there is information as well. He's not an idiot.
Mm.
Right? Anyway, Konstantin Kisin he's got his own podcast, Trigonometry. He's appeared on Rogan a couple of times. He's a bit like me. Except for he's actually a stand-up comedian, unlike me. But he's a person from the comedy world who has gone on to care a lot about news, and he says very serious things about the news in his podcast. But while still having a joke about it. But he's also like me, quite libertarian. He's probably where I am on the left, he is on the right. Like I'm a left-leaning libertarian. He's more a right-leaning libertarian.
Interesting.
But we actually aren't far apart on a lot of issues because we're both libertarians. Anyway, he has written quite extensively about this on his Substack, and it's quite interesting. Of course, he's a libertarian. You have to pay for his Substack, but there is a lot there that's free. Like if you can read the free bits if you want, and if you're interested, you can do the trials or read the whole lot. The whole lot's a great piece. It's a really, really good piece, but even the free bit is worth reading. And he's written about this and saying how it's making him reevaluate all his preconceptions about podcasting. Because he's saying, look, I thought the podcasting world was about bringing democracy to the media. It was about opening the door to people who had been gatekept away until now.
Okay, right.
And these people who never had access to a microphone before had just had to listen to reporters who are all from the same bubble, just telling you how it is.
Mm.
And they know they're in a bubble. But then podcasts have opened the world to more forms of information, more sources of information, so there is no more bubble. That's the theory, right?
Except for the bubble that you then listen to.
Exactly. And this is what Konstantin Kisin was saying. He suddenly realized, hearing these guys making fun of Douglas Murray, that they've just formed their own bubble.
Mm.
And their own anti-expertise bubble. It's not about left or right. They don't care about what anyone thinks. And he makes the point that Joe Rogan would never be so dismissive about expertise when he's talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He doesn't ask comedian Dave Smith what he thinks about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu like he does about Gaza.
Mm.
And the point Konstantin Kisin makes is that comedian Dave Smith has just as much knowledge about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as he does about Gaza. But in the case of Gaza, that's enough. In the case of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that's not enough.
Mm.
And so they've
Interesting.
They've kept the idea of expertise when it comes to sport and things that they care about.
Yeah.
But all the stuff they don't care about, which is the stuff that's actually important, they'll let Daryl Cooper come on. They'll let anyone come on and just say
Just
their
have a
piece.
crack.
Just have a crack, exactly. Just asking questions.
Because that's democracy.
So it's a really, really interesting period for the podcast world, I think. And I think that this is going to reverberate for a while, this debate. I don't know where it goes, but it's worth... I just want to raise it now with you guys so you can read up on it about yourself, because a lot of people are talking about this. So you can do a bit of your own searching, a bit of your own research, so to speak, and you can look up the Konstantin Kisin piece if you're interested as well. Autism correspondence. Oh, there's a lot of that. A lot of that. Okay. First of all, fun observation about RFK from Millennium Bug saying, because RFK said that ASD people may never play baseball. And Millennium Bug goes, RFK, have you met baseball people? Most of the people I play with are neurodivergent. The sabermetrics alone, the stats, the uniforms, the pattern recognition required for plays, the non-verbal communication through signals. It's a game about individual performance in a team environment. Bad example, darlings. I thought that was it's a great observation. Anyway, a few people really had a problem with us indulging the idea of ASD being treated like a disease. For instance, Dr. Henry, I don't mean to sound alarmist, but I'm gobsmacked that you both gave RFK so much benefit of the doubt, including agreeing that autism is a disease that deserves to have those diagnosed with it marked on a registry. I highly distrust this administration and RFK do anything positive with his list of diseased individuals, in inverted commas. At no point is the rhetoric of these leaders ever implied they have a good faith approach towards ASD. As a high-functioning person on the spectrum, I'm deeply hurt to hear such accepting discussion come from this show. A.L. Ferry jumped in as well. As a diagnosed autistic person who's up to date in research, Melina and Chaz's discussion is almost as flawed as RFK's. A. Autism cannot be cured, inverted commas. It can be managed, but not cured. It's a neurodevelopment condition. The only way I could be cured would be to take my brain out of my head. B. Credible scientists already mostly agree on a primary cause of autism. It's called genetics. The highest indicator of an autism diagnosis is an immediate family member with autism. Chaz, as per usual, gives too much benefit of the doubt on an issue like this. Autism isn't broadly understood by members of the public. Even Chaz peddles the idea... Sorry, autism isn't broadly understood by members of the public. Even Chaz peddles the idea of the spectrum being a line between Rain Man and severely disabled, which is entirely inaccurate to current messaging from advocacy groups and the autistic community as a whole, and is over a decade out of date. What autistic people need isn't a cure, but rather support and understanding from communities, workplaces, medical institutions, etc. Autistic people live in a world that isn't made for us, either by accident or on purpose, and we need to be accepted and integrated rather than othered. That's why so many people are concerned about their database and research RFK wants. It's others an already misunderstood group of people by taking the thing that is ever present in their lives and using it against them, seemingly without their consent. Yes, there are databases for other conditions, but those people agreed to have their information included, and by and large, they exist for things that are curable. Now, in the case of both those correspondents, I 100% agree about the language issue. I was being quite sloppy there when I was being off the cuff, as I often am. Using words like, inverted commas, disease, cure, fix, they're all wrong when it comes to ASD. Completely agree with A.L. Ferry. It's about managing. You can't change a brain. I agree, A.L. Ferry. At the same time, though, you can manage symptoms to create more harmony between you and your outside environment, which is what you say. In some cases, you can reduce diagnosable symptoms to the point where someone is no longer even diagnosed. I have known someone who has done that. You can make your life much more enjoyable. I know this firsthand. To the extent that that is what RFK wants to do. Take diagnosable people and make them not diagnosable, even though their brains are the same. To the extent he wants to do that, I support him wholeheartedly. I think that's a great thing. But yes, that does not sound like that is what he's trying to do at all.
Right.
I do agree with that. Also, Ferry, I may have communicated poorly. I almost certainly have. But I don't think, quote, the spectrum exists as a line between Rain Man and severely disabled. I don't think that at all. I think the spectrum is a broad 3D zone that is as diverse as the range of personalities that a human being can have. I think it can manifest itself in a million different traits and behaviors, some of which you would consider, or others would consider normal, inverted commas, some of which others would consider dysfunctional, in inverted commas. Some can be adapted, some cannot. I was focusing on the extreme end last week because that's where RFK was. That's what he was talking about. So I was just going where he was. And yes, I probably do try to be too agreeable sometimes. Yes. But to be fair, I think there are more than enough people in the world trying to not be agreeable enough. So why don't we make that my point of difference? And, one more main kind of feedback on this. A lot of people saying, look, this is fine, registries exist, all the rest of it. We don't think it's about holocausts or whatever, but we just don't trust RFK. And that's a reasonable comment to make.
Yep.
Let me give you an example from Millennium Bug. When Millennium Bug wasn't being funny, Millennium Bug was making good points. I think where I struggle with the RFK Jr. autism research or even a register is that I can see the value in it from a public health or disability support I can't see the value in it from a public health or disability support perspective. Part of research ethics is demonstrating there is value in the research you're proposing, as well as addressing privacy and confidentiality. There's got to be a clear rationale for why this particular hypothesis or design is worth studying. If there's already been plenty of research into the causes of autism or the link between environmental toxins has been discredited, There isn't an ethical basis for pumping more scientific resources into it. That doesn't mean they shouldn't spend money on autism research. I'm autistic. I'm all for more research. Would just prefer something like the approach in the Australian government's new autism strategy, not the government stooge, I promise, to research the true prevalence of autism in Australia and to evaluate the efficacy of existing care or supports, or maybe, dare I say it, something novel and innovative. RFK Jr.'s planned research is just a waste of time. And Lena notes why fear is understandable. With the Trump administration becoming increasingly authoritarian and unpredictable, I can fully understand why ASD folks and their families are becoming concerned about RFK's plans. A registry in most other government hands could potentially be a positive move. RFK has no interest in science, though, and from what little I've heard, he has an extremely limited understanding of autism. Why be researched in the loosest possible sense in order to prop up his brand of pseudoscience? Inclusion on a registry, especially in the US, where healthcare can be so expensive and is likely to become much more so in the current political environment, would have me extremely anxious. Could potential employers access the register? Could this lead to job loss, increased homelessness, suicide? I totally understand the fear. I really can. And Enyo made one more great point. Also, I'm going to put it out there, the very existence of a registry might put off people getting diagnosed. Trust me, there's already a lot of reasons to feel ambivalent about getting a formal diagnosis. That, I think, is the best point of all. That's a really good point. I totally understand distrusting RFK. I also distrust RFK. Even at last week's presser, he completely dismissed the idea of ASD rates reflecting greater awareness and diagnosis. He said, quote, "One of the things I think we need to move away from today is this ideology that the autism prevalence increase, the relentless increases, are simply artifacts of better diagnoses, better
Holy
recognition,
shit.
or changing diagnostic criteria, because this epidemic denial has become a feature in the mainstream media and it's based on an industry canard. Obviously, there are people who don't want us to look at environmental exposures."
RFK Jr. wouldn't know what denial is if it was roadkill and he hit it with his car.
Sassy. That there was last week. That wasn't 6 years ago on Jesse Waters.
Ugh.
That is last week at his press conference announcing his study. So
That's cool.
that is the thought process behind this. And that is an obviously bullshit position. Of course there's more awareness and diagnosis. How could you deny that? Even if you thought environmental exposures played a great role, how could you deny that there was any role for awareness and diagnosis? How many adults are there that are getting diagnosed with ASD right now that weren't diagnosed 30 or 40 or 50 years ago? Obviously, there's more diagnosis. They haven't changed. It's just the diagnosis has changed. Obviously. Also, he openly claimed that autism rates soared after industry contaminated Americans with toxins, and he called genetics a dead end for future research. Once again, how could you think that ASD doesn't have a genetic component? There is heaps of research demonstrating that. There is heaps of reality demonstrating that. Dude, come and see my family. It's obviously a genetic component. Once again, RFK, I'm not saying that there can't be other causes. I'm not ruling out all forms of environmental causes and toxins or smog or whatever. Like, I'm not ruling out anything. But how can you rule out genetics and the extent of diagnosis? It's very strange. Here's another quote from RFK. "Somebody made a profit by putting that environmental toxin into our air, our water, our medicines, our food. And now I'm trying to identify precisely what the environmental toxins are that are causing it." It screams out that he's prejudged the whole issue and is approaching it in bad faith. Also, he's completely ignoring the one thing, well, two things, the genetics and diagnosis, that every actual expert agrees upon. Never mind, as ZG noted, quote, Trump's, or maybe it's a shot that he added at the end of the clip that we played last week.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Gives the whole game away. Of course, RFK himself has claimed that vaccines cause autism at least 36 times, according to the Washington Post. Also, I can see why people would distrust any study that's going to be providing results in about 6 months. A gold standard study would follow a large representative sample of the American population over time, tracking those exposures that RFK is interested in, taking into account their genetic and health history, and monitoring whether any of them develop autism. The process would take years, maybe decades, and it might still not provide any clear-cut answers. But that's what a proper study would do. He thinks he can do that or the equivalent in 6 months. He can't. It would take 6 months just to link all the data. They're taking data from a whole bunch of different databases that aren't designed to interact with each other. If you want to put in proper data security processes and process it in a safe and ethical way, it's going to take forever, which makes me think they don't intend to do that, which is what these people are worried about.
Yep.
And also, if you want conclusions that quickly, you know what's going to happen. They're going to be chucking it into some AI program. That's the only way you get conclusions that quickly. They're going to run with what comes.
It's going to be grok.
It'll be something like that. And that is a recipe for chasing correlations. You know, correlations does not mean causation. That's what you're going to get. AI is only going to give you correlations. And then once again, that's bad science. So look, I'm aware of all of that. Totally. But when someone, why not end it right there? Because I just wanted to add one thought. When someone says they're trying to help people who I would like to see helped, I want to give them every opportunity to help and every benefit of the doubt. Maybe I am too agreeable. Sure, I can accept that. But that is where I'm ending it. We've heard each other out now. I don't disagree with you guys at all. I hope we understand each other. A government version of Signal correspondence.
Okay.
James was listening to me saying a couple of weeks ago with Jared how I was willing to die on the hill of keeping records of cabinet chats on Signal. And Jared said...
You were dying on that hill.
I was dying on that hill. And Jared said to me the government should make their own version of Signal that does indeed store the chats. This reminded James of something he saw on The Rest is Politics. Alistair and Rory made the point that after the Labor government, this is the British Labor government, that Alistair worked for, introduced a Freedom of Information Act in the 90s, politicians became acutely aware that anything they put in writing in a letter or an email could be made public from a Freedom of Information request. Labor politicians at the same time resorted to using post-it notes to communicate to avoid this. As technologies evolved, it seems they all started using WhatsApp, and no doubt Signal as well. The problem that Alistair and Rory noted is that politicians and bureaucrats want to be able to discuss issues, admit things they don't know, come up with wild and controversial ideas, be critical about government policy and their colleagues' ideas, and so on. But when these are going to be made public, none of that will happen since everyone's more concerned about protecting their reputation and the reputation of the party/government. While the idea of having those communications preserved for posterity is appealing, the reality is those politicians won't use a platform likely to be subject to disclosure requirements for any discussions that could be seen as controversial. As a result, I strongly suspect that any discussion around an alternative, secure government messaging app that would comply with the Presidential Records Act is ultimately irrelevant. If there's a crackdown on messaging apps, people will simply not use those messaging apps for those sorts of discussions, which unfortunately might make the hill you're prepared to die on, Chaz, a bit lonely. In the alternative, they might even be forced to actually talk to each other. The horror. At any rate, hopefully they find a better way than post-it notes, though. Wow. James, you are 100% right. As soon as I read that, I thought, that sucks. He's right. Thanks for sharing, James, and thank you for yucking my yum with reality. We've gone a bit of time here. I'll do two more. I've got three here, but I'll do two more. We'll see. Stable chaos correspondence. I asked for any examples of stability out of chaos. Baxter said, I think one such example would have to be the Roman Republic, which after its complete constitutional collapse over the 1st century BC was very much put back together again by Augustus, and the political institution he created lasted 1,500 years, putting the Roman monarchy in the very top tier of most enduring political institutions. So yes, it has occurred before that complete political collapse does birth an even more enduring system. Note, of course, that Roman government, like all pre-modern governments, was extremely limited by today's standards, so the impact on the economic actors and more local political economy was far less than would be the case today. Roman emperors had far less scope to screw things up than Trump. Good example. Thank you very much, Baxter. Having said that, I'm not sure America would love the idea of the emperor model, other than those who are advocating for Red Caesar. They'd love it. They'd be on board. They went, yeah, tick, tick, cosign. But thank you. Thank you, Baxter, for answering the call. We got one. Crusades correspondence. I think most people accepted my broader point last week when I was talking about Christianity. My point being that the frailties identified with religion are human frailties generally, and they just use religion as a tool while displaying those frailties. But the problem is within the people, not inherent to the religion. That was my point, which I think a lot of people accept. Fine. But many people, Lucky, thought I picked a bad example to illustrate it when I said, it's like blaming religion for the Crusades. Religion wasn't why they went to war. In the Middle Ages, they were always going to war. Religion just provided them with an excuse for that war.
Now's a bad time to admit I didn't watch that episode of Horrible Histories, so I'm about to get schooled as well.
Well, Baxter's here.
Thank you, Baxter.
I understand the point you're making, which is correct regarding the cause as being human, not Christian. However, it's impossible to deny that Christianity did provide an ideological framework without which the idea of occupying Jerusalem, of all places, would not make much sense. It's also true that during the 11th and 12th centuries, the increase in papal authority saw secular military, particularly Norman power, as a key partner in their spiritual project. Fair enough. They are all valid historical points, Baxter. Just to be clear, my point wasn't, though, no matter how I said it, wasn't that without religion, the Crusades would have happened anyway. That's not my point. My point is, you're right, they wouldn't have gone to Jerusalem. Why would they go to Jerusalem? My point is that imagine being in Jerusalem in that armor. They would not choose to go to Jerusalem unless they had a very good reason to go to Jerusalem. It's like 30 degrees and they're wearing body armor. Anyway, my point is that the Middle Ages would have been filled with wars regardless of whether religion existed or not, because the culture at the time was very conducive to war. Yes, the wars may have been different wars with different justifications against different people, but wars would have existed regardless. Religion, in my view, just provides a framework that people use to justify human behaviours. Human behaviours that would occur under some other circumstance in some other way because they're just human. Hateful religious people will use religion as an excuse for their hate. Hateful non-religious people will use something else as an excuse for their hate. Either way, there is hate. You're free to disagree, but that's the point I'm making.
If you disagree, that just makes you a hater?
No,
I'm being silly.
It makes you a skeptic. We like skeptics. We're cool, rational people on this podcast.
We are.
And then finally, I'll skip the transshipment one. Finally, we got a new Sting. It's actually an old Sting. I just haven't played it yet. A few eps back, we were messing around with some wordplay about how DOJ looks like Doge when it's written down. Sounds like Doe, the Department of Education. And we had them all together, and I was talking about does and deers, and Tully listened to this and thought they might whip up an unsolicited sting for us about it. Quote, listening to your show tonight, the Doe rants brought up a little inspiration, so I whipped you up a potential intro for Doe, oh dear. Perhaps a segment name? Tully, I have no idea when this may come up again. Doge, and the DOJ, Doge and DOE. But honestly, the first opportunity I get, I am absolutely going to use this sting. I'm going to create a segment. We're going to have some fun because this is a beauty and it deserves to get played as much as possible. Oh dear. Haunting.
Nice work, Tully.
Nice stuff, Tully. We are going to use. That will be a good way to go out from correspondence, I feel. Little housekeeping before we go. PEP news. It's increasingly looking like I think this is going to be on the ABC, at least this will be officially an ABC podcast for at least a very short period of time. We'll see how it goes. It looks like we're going to have a handover in 2 weeks after the 15th, but that might slip. We still got to try and work out where it's going to be recorded. You try and get a set together.
Does it mean I have to send you my 2-week notice?
No, you're going to be part of it.
No, but with you as my employer.
Yeah, it's fine. The reason I'm becoming surer is because I got an answer, the answer I cared about. Yes, extras, guys. Extras are coming. They don't care. As many extras as we want. Extras. As long as it fits within Lockie's hours, because we are not going to be making him work overtime because they definitely cannot afford that on this podcast.
I'll work what I got to work.
But there will be extras, okay? So we'll have a 3-hour main podcast, and then I'm thinking the extras will be short. When I say short, I don't mean like 2 minutes. I mean 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Like we'll go, rather than going a whole extra podcast that's 3 hours long, it will be, okay, this topic is an extra, then that topic is an extra. So we can spread them out like day after day. So we could put out 5 extras that are 10 minutes or 15 minutes each, rather than 1 2-hour podcast. I think that's what we're going to do. But we'll see. Point is, you're going to get serviced. You're not going to miss out on your PEP, okay? And that's all I cared about. So that's coming. And I did ask him about merchandise, whether we can sell merchandise on behalf of the ABC, because I said the Peppers, they like their merchandise. And they're going to get back to me on that. So as soon as they do, I will get back to you on that. This is proceeding.
Nice. Well done.
And like I said before, next podcast will be on Tuesday with El Hardy. I know some of the things we're talking about because they were the things I had to talk about in this podcast. The Ukraine-Russia peace proposals. But the judge who got arrested, that's a big story. 2-year-old citizens getting deported. We'll be talking about that. Trump's dodgy dealings dinner, like his little crypto dinner thing, which we'll talk about. A bit on Doge's final figures probably, and of course Mike Waltz RIP. That didn't happen when we talked yesterday. It's happened now. We'll definitely be talking about that with Elle. So and who knows what else. But that is going to be on Tuesday night. So or Tuesday afternoon. We will see you guys then. Anything else you want to add, Lockie?
Congratulations, Chaz. The hourglass has not been turned or even entirely used.
It was going to happen eventually.
Whoa.
And we took some breaks.
We did.
There we go. That on that triumphant note, well, let's just play the Doja Deer sting one more time on our way out. We'll see you guys later. Till then, stay peppy.